And we are live. Welcome to the Grayson podcast, everybody, where we're flipping the script. This man has interviewed everybody and nobody's interviewed him. So tonight we're going to dig deep. And when I say deep, I mean deep. We're going all the way back because even I, who've known this man for 20 years, have no idea how he found CyberSlam. So we're going to start right there in just a minute. But before we do, Grayson, thank you for taking the time out to do this with us tonight. I know a lot of people had a lot of questions, so I expect a lot of people to be watching.
That'd be wonderful. I'm glad we're doing it. It took us a while to get it started, but I'm super excited to be here. I've missed doing this. I've missed talking to everybody. This is cool. I'm glad we're doing it.
And I got to tell you, be honest, when I first started doing this, stepping in, at first I was a little overwhelmed, but I would be lying if I told you I'm not enjoying doing these. I know why you like them. It's fun to do these podcasts.
They're great. You know, sitting in your seat and being in the position to ask questions and kind of set the topic and draw people in. It's a great time. And you know, clearly doing those, 10 months ago had a huge impact on us, drawing people who had drifted back at least into the community. And over time, you know, we went through 3 months where we were busier than we've been in a long, long time. So there is tremendous benefit to these. And even if there isn't, it's just fun to do.
Well, and again, and I'm not tooting my own horn by any means, but it's a good thing you guys found me when you did, because if I wasn't here right now, I don't know that we'd be doing anything, because everybody had real stuff happen, and it's been, so I'm happy that I've been able to and without missing a beat. I'm enjoying making cards. I thought I wouldn't miss that, but I've actually had fun with it. So, so tonight we're going to kick off, and we're going to talk about how and by the way, before we actually do that, some assistance if people ask questions, because I'm pretty sure you've got at least a 2-3 monitor deal going.
I usually do, yeah.
I have to monitor Facebook with this, and this only periodically updates, and I have to constantly back in and back out to see questions. So if you see something you want to answer, please, by all means.
I'll keep my eyes out.
And guys in the chat, please try to hold your questions. We will try to do a little bit of a Q&A here and there in between. But to start off, let's talk about where we all started again, and that would be C-Slam. For instance, I myself, I don't even remember how I came across the whole idea of role play wrestling. I remember it coming up in a search, and I started looking at other sites, and I came across C-Slam, and I went, you know what the hell? And the next thing I know, 20 years later, I'm here. I met you and you were already here. So I don't even know the story of so tell us, how did you find C-Slam in the first place?
So that's it's probably similar to a lot of people's stories, but I was obviously a wrestling fan. I'd actually done, and I've told this story, I think, and people have had a good laugh at it. I did eFed wrestling when you mailed in. And then they would mail you a newsletter update before there were bulletin board leagues and before there was an internet. When I was young, like I was probably 13 when I saw it on the back of a Pro Wrestling Illustrated and signed up for it. And so, I hadn't done that in years, and I had, moved out and gotten married, and I was working about an hour and a half from home. And so it wasn't uncommon for me to a couple of nights a week stop and stay at my in-laws' place, which was, about a half an hour from work. It was a lot closer if I was working late. And so I got there one night and I was staying there and really didn't have a whole lot to do. The house kind of shut down and went to bed early. So I was putting around on the internet, and the idea I can't remember what was going on, but the idea came to me, and I was like, oh, remember when I used to do that? Man, I wonder if that ever made its way to the internet. And so that was the exact thought. I can picture exactly the room I was in. I was sitting on the bed, using the computer, searched it in, and Scoop Central came up. So I started reading, and of course I'm reading all the news articles, and there's that link at the bottom, right?
Mhm.
And I clicked on that link, and I think I had to go to work at like 9 o'clock the next morning, and I was up till like 5 a.m. Like,
Oh,
got in, I created, I think, 2 characters the first night. And by the end of the week, I had probably already made 4.
out. Hmm.
So it was, it was a lot like that. And I found myself in this place. I remember I went to work the next day, and admittedly, like, I was thinking more about that than I was about work, right? Like, it was just this new toy that I had found, and all I wanted to do was play with it.
Hmm. Oh, I can understand that, because I'm telling you, I think I've mentioned this before. At one point, I almost wrecked my marriage over C-Slam, because I was so into C-Slam. I would go to work, and I learned how to get into the training portion of the computer, because in the training portion you could go online.
Right.
I was obsessed at one point. But so when you came to C-Slam, and you said you created, who was your actual first character you created?
Who do you think?
Was it Ed?
Mm-mm. It was Hawk.
Nighthawk was your first character.
So Ed is my oldest character. I don't know if I've told you guys this before. I found stuff from when we were in elementary school, and we were doing like our own little. I wrote a computer program so that we could do ourselves what we now do as grown men. And I wrote a computer program to simulate wrestling matches, and Ed was my very first character. And we found, one of the guys dug out records of us doing matches and Ed being a champion 30 years ago, maybe 40 now. But when it came to C-Slam, Hawk was the first character that I created. I created Hawk. I was really in that whole Ministry of Darkness kind of vibe that the Undertaker had gone through, and for whatever reason, thought it was super cool. And obviously I wasn't alone at the time. There was lots of people playing characters like that, but Nighthawk, and then Demon Slayer, who never got off the ground, but those 2 were the characters that I created for mail-in e-wrestling years ago. And so they were the first 2 that I made. Hawk first, and Slayer ended up in a different fed, and I was like, well, I don't have time for that. And I kept making characters until I got Ed, and Ed landed in the same fed as Hawk, which is why they were the first 2 I played.
Oh, nice. Yeah, my first was Storm, and that was it. And I went with it, and I told that story already. But who was your I'm sorry, I got my notes over here. I don't have a nice setup, so I have to turn and look. I'm a little disorganized this evening. I apologize. So your first was Nighthawk, and then Ed. What fed was it, and who was your commission? Do you remember?
I do. So it was IMA. So Midwestern Alternative Wrestling. My very first commissioner was the Atomic Zim Zum. Turned out that guy was so I know him. Like, we've hung out. He lives 15 minutes. Well, now I think he lives a half an hour from me, but at the time he lived 15-20 minutes away. Wow. I didn't know at the time. I did my learning under him. He did a good job of kind of going, hey, so you're starting out as the typical worst player ever, and prompted me and kind of pointed me to who I should pay attention to, and gave me some tips on how to engage the game. And that really helped grow me, along with a bunch of other players and things. So yeah, he was my first commissioner. He probably helped me figure out how to position myself in the fed and how to sim using the engine and slam effectively. But he wasn't the one that, taught me to care more about the story than the title. I learned that when I went to the Nationals.
Yeah, I have to be honest. I cared more about the titles for quite a while before I started caring about the stories.
I think everybody did, right? I think that's a norm.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I think back, and we did some things that I don't think would fly anymore. The community, I think, is a little more connected. I think people have a louder voice than we did with our commissioners back in the slam. But like when I got the belt on Ed, I think I lost in my first title defense. And I said to him, like, yeah, well, wouldn't it be cool if I just got DQ'd and didn't lose anyways? It's like, right, let's do that. Like, just completely buried the other guy because I just wasn't ready and didn't think twice about it. And nobody said a word about it. So, hey, so I just saw a Jason Miller post on the live stream. Does he know we still play, or is he just totally ignoring every message we send to him?
Well, I can tell you, for a moment, if I may jump into character for a brief moment, Gino, you're fired. You showed up. You're no showed. You're fired. That's it. You're with Dawson. You're with Dawson. You're a fan now. If you want to purchase tickets to come watch Ed and Mano work, you're more than welcome to. But you're fired. Okay. Anyway, back to our conversation. Speaking of some of these older guys, when did you meet guys like Lars and Diggsy and Marlowe?
So I wonder if Lars remembers this. I don't know how it happened, but in one of the indies, and it might have been Maw for like a week, or it might have been IPWL, which was my first commissioning assignment. Smash Mouth showed up. And didn't stay long. Like I think he was on his way through that to a national, and in the time that he was there, we got a little bit of opportunity to interact, and I was like, oh hey, so Tim's got this crap nailed down, and then I want to say it was Hawk. Hawk and Diggsy really was the first time we played a lot with him. Like I think I saw him in the elites, right? Because I took Ed up to the elites for a while before I stopped playing there, and so I think we crossed there, but we didn't really get to know each other a lot. But when I took Hawk to Wrassle, so that was pretty far removed from that, Diggsy and I went into Tim's Fed, and Tim didn't really know what to do with us, didn't know a lot about us. So he put us in a match with each other, and we I said to Bruce, like, lay it all out, like put it all down. It was King of Wrestling quality stuff. Like we had backstory, and we worked the backstory in for the people who didn't know it, and then kind of told the match. There was a lot of drama and story in that match. And I remember Tim kind of turned and looked and went, hey, man, we should do some stuff. And I think he had Lasher kicking around at the time, and we started connecting with Lasher as a player. And then for Tim and I, the real personal connection, we went to a baseball game in Chicago. And I can't remember.
Wrigley?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you would have said Sox, I would have turned this off.
So somehow, we did that. And I'd like to tell you, I can remember how that whole plan came together, but we did that. And Tim and I personally, I think we're friends from then on. And we got together in Chicago a couple of times. He and I would get together with Bagel Guy, and, Bagel hooked us up with limo rides to the baseball park. And like, it was really an event when we went to the city. And so we got to do a couple of things like that. And from there, Tim and I played together and cross paths a lot. And then I think Bruce came to Tim and I and said, hey, do you know they're doing this indie Wrassle thing, and they'll let us build our own Fed and do whatever we want? And everything after that is, I think, well documented.
I have to admit, I'm a little surprised by that, because I had always assumed, because from my perspective, because I remember, I don't remember the specifics, but I remember, I could be wrong, but I thought you came to me about bringing somebody. You're the reason I created Saber.
Right.
And when I was reading what you were doing, in my mind, you were already at the level that you are now. And I always had assumed that you and Lars and Diggsy had known each other while you were in C-Slam. I didn't realize it was.
So Diggsy and I don't know if Lars and Bruce knew each other in C-Slam. I think they crossed paths. I don't know how well they knew each other. But by the time that we were Wrassle people, they had crossed paths and worked together a bunch. Bruce was my very first draft pick as a national commissioner. And I brought him up and then alienated all of his friends and made him the outcast. And it took him about 2 weeks until he was raging, telling people how much he hated me. And then something clicked and he went, "Oh my gosh, you're doing this in character." And I went, "Yeah." And he was like, "This is brilliant." And we were gold from that moment on. And I saw Tim kind of commenting and saying like, "Hey, when we were in Chicago, when we went to Wrigley, Bipolar was there and Max was there and Diggsy and Dog Ox." Year one, Tim, it was my brother-in-law, our friend, you, me, and Gary. And when we went out drinking after the afternoon game, and we were out pretty late, having a heck of a party, Tim and I called Bruce to give him crap about not being there, even though he wasn't invited to go. And it was year two. Oh, and Bipolar was there year one. And then year two, Max and Dog Ox, Soothsayer, came and we did it again. So there was 2 trips. I think that's the sequence that it went down. I just want to throw that out because I know that Tim, like me, has fond memories of those trips.
Yes, and I've said this before, and I will say this again because back then I was not able to do things like that, but I am now. So this is something post-COVID we need to arrange.
I'm so jealous. Tim's got a whole bunch of baseball games on his schedule for this summer, and if we were post-COVID and border crossings were earlier or easier, I'd meet him in Chicago. I would do the one he's doing with Gino in Cincinnati, but it's just impractical for border travel right now. It's a real nightmare still.
Well, one of these days, hopefully, maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
So you commissioned when you were in C-Slam. I remember that specifically because I was in your Fed. Talk to us a little bit about your first stint as a commish.
IPWL. It was really interesting. I played for a while. I played into the Nationals. I got to work with I worked with a lot of people that didn't really blow up and become the big names, the big stars, but really were talented, good writers. And it never occurred to me that I wanted to be the commissioner. And then kind of had a moment like, I can do this better than the guy that's doing it. Like really, hey, this guy I've got now is terrible. I could do this. And so I went on and I put an application in, and I think at the time I asked a couple of questions of I think the commish of Long Shots Fed at that time might've been Myth. And so I asked him, he gave me some feedback, and I'd almost given up. Like I thought I'd get an answer right away, and it took like 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, I got a message that said, "Hey, starting tomorrow, you'll have access to IPWL. You're going to be the commissioner." And I took who at the time had been Nighthawk's manager, and that was Grayson, and pulled the idea of a manager totally out of the character because he didn't need it, and used that persona to run IPWL. And so IPWL for me was really cool. A lot of people I was playing with actually made sure to get a character in there, but also I inherited a bunch of guys in IPWL that I didn't know previously, that since, you guys, and my memory's not what it was, but I want to say like that long ago, man, Val might've been one of the guys in that Fed. Like there was some people in that Fed that at the time were super young. And now I look back and I'm like, IPWL was actually pretty talented Fed. Like there's a lot of guys who were in that Fed that actually ended up being really darn good.
Well, since you mentioned that will segue us into our first top 5 list.
Let's do it.
Okay, so this top 5 list is specific for C-Slam. Your
Yeah.
top, let me go back. I gotta find it. Top 5 slammers who left an impression for you as a new player, who made an impression for you as a new player.
So I'm going to be really specific. So I took that really literally, and I looked at the new player element of it. So I looked at people that I crossed paths with in Slee Slam, probably in my first 3-4 months. And for me, number 5 on my list, and I know Chris mentioned in the past remembering this guy, long shot, went to I can't even remember the Fed name, and I played him as the ultimate free agent, right? That was his gimmick. He was always a free agent, and I ended up teaming up with a guy named Burnout, and for me, Burnout was really good at teaching me how to play off of somebody, not in the ring, but in matches, and how to work and use each other's characters really well. And so I really enjoyed working. We actually had another guy in the group. We had like a Trinity thing going on, and I wish I could remember who that was. And he fell away first, and then Burnout and I played for a while, and I turned down a couple of promotion opportunities to the Nationals because they didn't offer one to him, and it wasn't my primary character, so I didn't worry about it. And then when he took a break, I went to the Nationals with Longshot. Number 4 on my list was a guy named Martyr. Martyr was in the IMA when I got there, and was probably my first big feud, and maybe my longest running feud. We built a big stable in IMA back then, around Nighthawk and Dusk and some other people, Rev, and Martyr like fought the cause of joining the stable, and was really that, like, that period where DDP wasn't on anybody's side in the WCW. Right. He was that guy, and so it was such a great dynamic to work off of. I really enjoyed him. Number 3 on my list was a guy whose character name was Big Papa, and
I remember that name.
Yeah, he was the leader of a stable called the Architects of Armageddon, the A of A. And they had a number of guys in IMA when I got there. And that was the first look I had at a stable and what, that meant in the Slam engine and in the Slam days. And it was probably my largest Slam feud, was with that stable, Nighthawk against Big Papa. But the big story that came out of that wasn't Nighthawk against Big Papa, but it's number 2 on Slammers who left an impression on me. That's how I met Rev Future. He was in my very first Fed, and he was in my very first post.
Wow.
So Rev and I go all the way back to then, and man, I'll bet you. So I did your classic terrible post, out of the gate. Hey, I beat you on the sim. Like, I'm better than, like, just terrible. Rev responded to it in the appropriate way. And from that, we started playing off each other, and I got the commissioner to give us a couple of matches. And he said something in one of the matches that sparked an idea, and I shot him an idea. Why don't we do this? And got his ICQ, and we ICQ'd each other. Let's do this as a story. And he was really my first big storyline where I started to flesh out who Nighthawk was. And so, for me, Rev was a big reason why there's any depth to the character, that the character survived and had a story to tell, largely came out of that angle I ran with Rev. And the number 1 slammer that left an impression on me as a new player, again, I was in IMA with Death Wish. And, for me, Tay is a legend. I still hit him up, and we'll talk comic books and other stuff. I'm a big fan of his. If he still played, I would be super entertained. But he pushed the boundaries. He was probably my first experience with a comedy wrestler, a guy who was capable of writing match action, and yet at the same time wrote some just brilliant comedy stuff, and was comedic gold. And he and Holochico, once we moved out of CyberSlam, connected, and then I got 2 doses of comedy wrestlers who could actually write match action, and it was amazing. I was a big fan. I'm still a big fan. I love the work that he did, and a shout out because he got so mad at me once. He did stick figure porn on the boards using HTML to show me giving it to the commissioner in the butt, and got himself suspended for like a week or something. But it was brilliant.
Oh, that's good stuff. I got a 5 list for this. I'll just make it quick because this is more about you than me. But some credit where credit is due. For me, the top 5 guys that left an impression. Obviously, I'm leaving commissioners out because I was going to include
Correct.
them.
Yeah.
Well, that's a subject for another time. For me, number 5 would be Red Raider. He was my first ever tag team partner. I gravitated toward him, and this was before Storm is who you know today. Storm back then, I mean, we did some stupid thing, some takeoff on the Blair Witch Project. So I actually started off being a little comedic with him. Number 4 for me, in succession, because they're all gonna be all stars except one. Number 4 for me, Flesh Basher. Number 3 would be Canadian Kid.
Sure.
Those 2 guys, when I got pulled up to CWF, they took me under their wing, and I got to be part of Bobby Bob's All Stars, which is fantastic. I mean, number 2 on my list, I can't say he was a great writer, but I just enjoyed him, and he and I were always butting heads with each other in character, but he was very supportive, always trying to help me behind the scenes. Jericho.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I mean, and he just, after C-Slam closed, he disappeared like a fart in the wind. I don't know what happened to him.
I think a lot of people did, more than we realize.
Yeah, a lot of people did. And of course, my number 1 guy, and he has to be, because without this guy, you and I would not be having this conversation right now. And that guy is Snap Taylor.
Wow.
He's the one who came to, after that first terrible post, because I didn't know HTML. It was this gigantic block. I saw it and I went, this is garbage. I'm embarrassed. I'm never coming back here. And then I got an email, and it was from Snap. Basic HTML. I like what you wrote. Do this, do this, do this, try again.
Yeah.
And then later on, Snap and I went CWF. We all joined the All Stars together. If he hadn't have done that for me, I would never have continued. I would have been one and done, and I would have never come back.
I think it's an interesting thing. First of all, Miller tried to call it, and I guess he got it wrong. He predicted number 1 on your list would be Prototype. Is that not a thing?
If we were talking about the slammers I hate the most.
Right. I think one of the things that's really interesting is we talk a lot about how in the Slam and even in early Wrassle, because there were so many people signing up, we got kills a lot.
Oh, yes.
But the truth is, if you look at a lot of the early players, they would kill you on the boards, and off the boards, they would reach out and go, here's how you get better. There were a lot of guys that had a lot of talent and knew how to play better than you did, who weren't shy about saying, hey, I can help you with this. You need to know this thing, while going on the boards and absolutely cutting you to ribbons.
Oh, and I will mention that Jericho was that guy for me. Jericho is one of the reasons why I developed the thick skin you needed to survive in C-Slam, because he would utterly shred me, and then he'd come back and he goes, look, I like what you did here, but you left yourself open. So do this, try this, do it. He made me become more innovative, and he actually helped me hone who Storm started to turn out to be as we moved along.
Right.
But so now we get to the point where we're going to talk a little bit about the C-Slam closing, which again, for all of us, I know that was a shock, because I will never, even if I get Alzheimer's, I will remember winning the Ultimate title, logging in the next day, seeing my picture in the corner, and we're closing. What the shit?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how your reaction when you found out that they were closing, and your thoughts on that.
So I don't know if anybody remembers, because I don't think I am. I mean, I'm not even a medium name from C-Slam days, but I had Ed in the elites when that deal was going down, and I first of all, I was super frustrated because I felt like, hey, I'm in the elites. I'm starting to make it. I'm starting to find a groove. And a couple of times I got pulled up, and I struggled and ended up going back down because I couldn't find a story. Like, I couldn't find something to sink my teeth into. I wasn't there with people I knew, and I hadn't figured out yet how to be the center of things. And so I was trying to like find something, and nobody was giving me anything. So so I came up that time, and you know, I had some knowledge of some people. I had started to connect with some people in the nationals that also had gone up. And then I saw that, and I know a lot of people were like, I'm gonna play it out, and they even got a reprieve for a little while. I pulled the plug in like 5 minutes. I was so frustrated that they decided for the consumer that the consumer no longer wanted the product. Like, all my business acumen, and let's be honest, at that point in time, my business acumen isn't what it wasn't what it is today. But at least I knew enough to know when a consumer is consuming the product, you don't say to them, hey, you're wrong, you want a different product. You sell them what they want. And so I pulled the plug, and I would have been one of those names you went, remember, whatever happened to that guy, except that, you know, a couple of people reached out to me and said, hey, we're going to go do this other site. Are you going to come back? And Rev was one of them.
Yeah, and it's funny because, you know, a lot you probably had a parent or a friend or somebody who always, one of those people always tell you everything happens for a reason. At the time it hurt, it sucked,
yeah,
knowing that we had no place to go, you know, except where they were trying to, you know, direct us. But if it hadn't happened, would we still be playing right now?
Yeah, it's a good
You
question.
know, so you know, as much as it sucked back when it happened, you know, it in a way it's kind of good that it did. But obviously now this is going to transition me into my next question: is there were actually 3 options for people to go to. Now I had before C-Slam closed, I had gotten wind of Wrassle, and I took a look at Wrassle.
Yeah.
And I saw some people who were playing in C-Slam were playing in Wrassle. I wasn't real keen on it because I'm a creature of habit. So, like for instance, right now, I love what we do. I love what we have. But if we actually had a site with a whole new different board for the first couple of weeks, I'd be like, I don't like this because it's not what I know. So I looked at Wrassle and I was like, I think that was the first place I made Calgary Kid. I tried Wrassle and I went away. So you had, after C-Slam's closing, you had Wrassle, you had Cyber Brawls, and you had Ring Wars.
Right.
Now, I took one fucking Ring Wars and went, yeah, no. I did not like Cyber Brawls, but I did sign up, and that lasted for about a day, and then I wound up in Wrassle. Now, where did you go after C-Slam closed, and what were your impressions of those?
I did go to Cyber Brawls. I went to Cyber Brawls because they said you can have your own Fed and all your people can be in it. And so I was able to get all the guys who had, you know, Bruce went with me, and Soothsayer went with me, and Terror went with me, and Death Wish went with me. And so like the Rev was with me. Our Father was there. Like, it was a big group of guys that were like, hey, if they'll give you your own Fed, let's go do that. And we got there, and they were so unstructured that they let us do, like, I intentionally said to guys, hey, at the start of the next month, put all your characters into that Fed over there, whip them up, and on the day of their biggest card, leave and come back. And let's see who we can get to follow you, because you're better writers than they are. They've got about 4 guys we want. Let's see if they'll follow you back. And from that was our first opportunity to do like a hostile takeover of a Fed. We got Holochico, we got Chiata, we got Captain All That, who, you know, Mad Bomber, right? And I'm trying to think, I think we got one other. So we got 3 or 4 guys that stuck with us and played with us, you name, all the way through to FedEx. And we stayed there for a while, but you know, the experience wasn't great there. The general apathy towards the site was pretty strong. At some point, we ended up going to Ring Wars. Partially because Poison reached out and said, listen, I know you're there because they'll let you do what you want. Like, not only will I let you do it, like, I'll let you tell us what we need to be building. I was like, we think that's cool. Like, I don't know that we know all the answers, but we love the idea that you'll let us tell you what you should be building. And I think that was before Myth got involved with it. And it was Myth that got involved with it, right? I think that's right. My memory's not the best. So we went there. We played there for a little while. It was fine. Listen, so by then I'd already figured out I cared more about the role playing than I did about the engine. It was my priority. And thankfully I was with a lot of guys who wanted to write story, and the engine just helped them decide what the outcome was going to be. And so, yeah, we had fun and the engine was fine. It was Rev who first went to Wrassle and said to me, you should check out Wrassle. I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, nobody else from Wrassle had ever reached out. Nobody else that I was playing with had gone to Wrassle. You and I knew each other, but it wasn't like you were pinging going, hey, what are you doing with Nighthawk right now? Like, we knew each other, but we weren't, we talked when we crossed paths in tournaments and stuff like that. Right. But, and so we were, a couple of years late on getting to Wrassle because nobody that was with us had gone there.
Yeah, and I can relate because like I said, I tried Cyber Brawls. I immediately didn't like it. Very disorganized. You could tell that it was on a whim.
If I had known that they shut down at the time, I didn't know they shut down C-Slam to force people to Cyber Brawls. I would have refused to go on principle.
Yeah,
but I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I understand. And then I looked at Ring Wars. I didn't really care for it, so I tried Wrassle. And Wrassle took for me. It's kind of like as a salesman, being a salesman. If you believe in a product, you're going to be good at selling it.
Yeah.
Well, what I saw in Wrassle, I believed in enough that Burnt walked up to me and basically came to me one day and goes, hey, you want to do this? And I'm like, you're going to let me make a Fed? And I was like hook, line, and sinker. I mean, who wouldn't be?
Right.
And thus the CWA was born. And then you guys, I remember, eventually you guys came over. But yeah, I mean, I looked at the other two, not impressed. So with that in mind, what are the top 5 reasons Cyber Brawls and Ring Wars suck?
So I actually have some answers for you on this.
I only have 2.
So I got all 5. I actually worked my way through. I came up with 5 answers. And here's the thing, I think it'll surprise some people. The number 5 reason, so not 4, 3, 2, or 1, number 5, the website. In both cases, it was deficient, right? It's basically what we've got. Like it was a little better than what we've got, but not much, right? Like, and so the website, right? What's the reason that we don't attract new players and we haven't blown up? Like the person I asked to do the web development is teaching himself and doing it part-time and has a baby, and like, you knock the website. Like if you had real, like I got some guys that work for me who just aren't interested in doing it, but could do it. And if they did it, it'd be 10 out of 10. We'd have more players just based on that alone, right? You can hardly go out and advertise, hey, come see this game that we play a little bit over here. And then we kind of use that, like, and so for me, I think that's number 5. Number 4, and possibly related, like I was just saying, is the lack of new players being generated. C-Slam was tied to Scoop Central, and being tied to the point of interest that people can come to matters, right? In the modern age, you would look and say, like, hey, you're advertising. Do you want to put a banner on the bottom of that? Or do you want to put a hit for everybody who searches anything wrestling related on social media? Right? Like, and so that advertising piece to generate new players is a big volume of players has a huge impact on all things related to the success of the game.
Right.
Number 3 for me, and man, this could have been number 1. Number 3 for me is the absence of important writers. Like too many good writers didn't choose those places to play.
Yeah.
Really that simple. Wrassle was a superior site, but lots of superior products have failed because the right people at the beginning chose the other product. And so if the big names, you think about coming out like the Hall of Famers, yourself, or if Lars had decided Ring Wars was the spot, Ring Wars might still be going today. Right? Like he had a huge following as a commissioner, as a Hall of Fame guy. If Lars and Genocide and Vigilante and you and some of those big guys that go back, Naked Man, it wouldn't have taken more than, and coming out of Slam, this is not a big number, 10 of the big names to change the balance of power. Because people go places to play with people.
Yeah.
Product can be better, but if you can't get the people there. So I think Wrassle had a better product, but I think they also got the right people out of the gate. And that's an important thing. Number 2, they failed because they got a lot of blowback for not being CyberSlam. Straight up. There was a lot of, think about all the names that we mentioned that nobody knows what they did, because when it was not CyberSlam anymore, it was nothing.
Yep.
And I
every
think
person that I named on my impressions list, every single person,
right,
gone. The CyberSlam closed, gone, never seen again.
Yeah. And I think the number one reason that specifically to Cyber Brawls that it failed was that Cyber Brawls was itself somebody's personal agenda.
Yeah.
It was a political thing, and it got in the way of its opportunity to be a successful replacement to CyberSlam. The truth is, it could have been better. It was possible to make a better website. It was possible to make a better version of Wrassle. None of us have designed the perfect game. It's always possible.
Yeah.
But in that particular case, that personal agenda of I'm going to show people this is actually what they wanted, blew up in their face.
Yeah. And it's funny that you said that, because like I said, I don't have a top 5 list. I have a top 2 list, and it's both the same thing. Cyber Brawls wasn't C-Slam. The Ring Wars wasn't C-Slam. Right. And I could expound on those and also say, it's about the people you play with. I go to Ring Wars and I look, and most people went to Cyber Brawls, which is why I tried that.
Yeah.
But when I went to Ring Wars, I didn't see anybody I knew. And then when I went to Cyber Brawls, I saw people I knew, but I remember because I had reconnected with Red Raider for a small time, and we were at Cyber Brawls, and we're both talking to each other on IM, and I'm like, dude, this blows. This is terrible.
Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with this. So I went to Wrestle. He went to Wrestle, but he floundered and he just disappeared. And it didn't hurt. Like you said, it could have been different depending upon when you went, because when I left C-Slam for Wrestle, I took the whole of CRF with me.
Right.
I know Tim took the whole of CCW with him. If Lars and I would have gone to the same place to get at the same time,
Wrassle would have died.
Wrestle might be the one. Yeah, Wrestle might have been the one
sitting
out in the win.
I'm fairly confident that the superior product did win, but it didn't win because it was the superior product. It won because you and Tim chose it, and you exerted a lot of influence at the time of the C-Slam exodus. And if that had gone differently, and obviously there were other people, but man, I'd put my money on those two. Like those two names and the feds they took with them. If you'd gone somewhere else, people would have followed, and it would have changed the balance of power for sure.
And on a side note in the chat, Alistair says it's Maverick and Lars' fault I went to Wrestle. So there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tim did take some time off after that. But that
I don't think he's alone. I think a lot of people did.
Oh yeah, I mean, so.
But just for clarity, I don't think that changes anything. I think everybody goes to Wrassle, and Tim shows up a year later and says, I'm opening a Fed in Cyber Brawls. A whole bunch of people go, hey, I like this site, but I mean, that's Lars running a Fed. I got to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I remember when C-Slam closed, and Lars was trying to keep things afloat.
Yeah. That's
And
right.
I mean, at that point, me and Tim weren't like super close, but I learned a lot by watching him.
Hmm.
And I was like, I want to stay, but I mean, they're offering to let me do this over here. I'm sorry, I gotta go, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So you get to wrestle, and I don't know the answer to this question because I was knee deep in CWA and everything else. Did you commission Wrassle? Did you have any inkling to commission Wrassle at all?
I did not commission Wrassle. So I spent some time, first of all, it was the first time in a long time that the weight of a lot of people playing wasn't on me, right? So when CyberSlam closed down, a lot of players were in my Fed previously were like, what are we doing? We were friends. And so I commissioned those Feds. So I felt a lot of responsibility to make sure we had a place we wanted to play. And that carried through Ring Wars. When we went to Wrassle, it was the first time in a long time that I could step back and, oh, let's just all go to, and like, I want to say, I don't know that we went to Tim's Fed right away, but we got there pretty quick. Like, hey, I see a CCW. Can we get in there? Right. And so it was the first time in a while I hadn't had to. So I went and played for a while. And I think I became vocal about what I thought the flaws of the game were pretty quickly. And I started burning bridges before I got to the point where I was ready to put some energy into commissioning again. And I'm pretty sure that those bridges, got lit up with napalm.
Well, speaking of those bridges, that transitions us into our next question. And you and I have always been brutally honest when it comes to this particular subject I'm going to bring up. But for the benefit of the guys watching, if there's something that's been left unsaid, now's the time to say, what were your true, honest feelings on Burnt and Ice Hog?
Yeah, that's a good question. So largely outside of our direct conflicts, I don't care. Like, if you know the story, you know that I wrote for, they had an affiliation that was non-Wrassle news. So like wrestling news. And I wrote for that site for a while. And you've probably heard me say before, they got the idea for masking from a story I wrote on that site. And when it was originally released, Ice Hog gave me credit. And actually, we had a friendly level of respect for each other where I would write articles like, who are the 5 greatest tag teams of all time, that kind of stuff. And we would have debates about it and great articles. And I had been talking about masking since C-Slam. Alex and I had that conversation when they did the C-Slam tour and he was in Toronto, and I went, that you guys haven't done this is crazy talk. Like, the great moments in wrestling are often built around the surprise reveal. That's so easy to do when you're coding. Like, why don't you and he just went, yeah, that's a good idea. And it never came to fruition. And so I used to continue to advocate it. And Hog we had a great relationship at that point in time. And I wouldn't say like we were pals, but good working relationship. I would put out ideas. They would respond, like things were fine. I didn't see any reason for them not to be. It didn't go sideways until Federation X crushed Wrassle. And then it went sideways in a hurry. They told us we could do whatever we wanted, of course. And I think I've told this story before. Tim was busy like writing the rules and how we're going to do things. And Bruce was busy like thinking of structure and setup. And I went to work building a marketing plan. And I think, we reached out and connected with, I'll bet you every player who was in Wrassle heard of what we were doing. And we picked what we thought were the 3 big deals that would make people want to come and play with us. Number 1, you can swear if you want to swear. We don't care. Number 2, and I think Bruce and I were cooler with that than Tim was. I think Tim was still kind of like, do we really need swearing?
Yes.
Right. I said, number 2, you can't buy a title. We didn't even explain it. We just said, hey, here's what you need to know about us. You can swear, you can't buy a title. And I can't remember what number 3 was, but we kind of had picked our 3 bullets and we plastered that. We did email marketing campaigns. We did ICQ campaigns. We did messaging in Wrassle. Man, they were mad at us before day one.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go soliciting players. Like, no, you don't allow feds to do that to other feds, but we're not one of your feds. The rules of Indy and the contract that we have says we pay you and we can do whatever we want. We're not one of your feds. We don't have to follow your rules.
And just because I want to clarify this, because I don't think I've ever clarified this before. I'm pretty sure most people are aware of this. But at the time of FedEx's first iteration, I was the CEO. I had nothing to do with this. This was going on behind my back. Because I brought Storm to FedEx.
Right.
Unfortunately,
why wouldn't you? It was amazing.
And it was great. But unfortunately, because I was CEO and I was still running a Fed, and I had a wife and 2 kids and a full-time job, I couldn't keep up with FedEx, and I felt obligated to continue as CEO and the guys in my Fed, so I had to make a choice. But I did not know any of the stuff that was going on between Burnt Ice and Jeff.
So a couple of things happened, and I would say, looking back on it, it wasn't direct animosity me to either of them at this particular point in time. They chose to interact with Tim. I think they felt like they knew Tim the best as a commissioner that was well known and well regarded. And I think Tim comes across as the more moderate communicator of all of us. And so they chose to communicate with Tim. And they put a lot of pressure on Tim, and Tim, to his credit, I think was professional with them, but would come sit with Bruce and I'd be like, we don't have to listen to any of this. And it really started to break down. And I don't think it was, I think it was a little snippy. I don't think it had gotten openly hostile yet. And then Burnt went at Bruce on the Board of Doom. And somebody told me. And to say that I carved Burnt up is an understatement. I strung him up like a dead hog and gutted him on the Board of Doom. And that was the end of any opportunity that we were going to communicate like rational human beings. I got super defensive about something that he said to Bruce, which I thought was way over the line, and unloaded.
Well, I will, and I've said, we've talked about this before, and I will say that I don't want to say he was not my friend. Burnt was my friend.
Yeah.
He afforded me opportunities. I mean, I wouldn't be the person I am today in this game without Burnt letting me do what I was able to do. I mean, you think commissioning a Fed is hard. Try running the whole damn show. I mean,
100%.
He allowed me to do these things. At the end, loyalty means a lot to me.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for him, I was more loyal to you than I was to him, because I've said this 1,000 times. I will preach this till the day I die. You do not fuck over your consumers for your own mistakes.
100%.
You cannot achieve anything by doing that. Ice Hog, I didn't deal with Ice very often.
Yeah.
But I also, I believe he was the driving force behind, you mean we could make money with this thing? And he got in Burnt's ear. Because Burnt never came across to me. And again, I could be wrong, but Burnt never kind of pictured to me as the kind of guy who was in it for the money. But I think, hey, like I said, I'm only speculating. But anyway.
So here's what I'll say. So you asked, like, what do I really feel about them? And the truth is a couple of things. Number one, Burnt didn't live super far from me, guys. He lived less than 30 minutes from where I lived. When things started to go sideways, all he had to do was say, man, why don't we get together and get a beer and sort this shit out? And I would have gone. It wasn't a get him situation. It was a, like, let's not be stupid about this, but if you're going to make me fight, then I'm going to come out swinging. And I think once I came out swinging, he didn't see any path for us to come back together. Hog, to me, had always been the more moderately positioned, but I will say this. Clearly, the attitude changed when I started to fuck with their money.
Oh, yeah.
when FedEx started cutting into how much money they made, there was the conversations just weren't rational. Like you could say I was a jerk to them and I wouldn't even argue. There were days I was awful to them. What I did on the board of Doom to Burnt was unnecessary. But I was always of the, like, what's best for the game? Can we get back to what's best for the game? And it clearly, once we started to screw with their money, that wasn't a conversation that was possible. In fact, in all of their good faith negotiations, they were actually willing to negotiate as long as I wasn't involved.
Speaking of negotiation, I just caught this and I want to ask you this real quick because I noticed it before it disappears. Mr. Crow is asking, what was your first thoughts, reactions to the 11 billion post, which had a ton of shade towards you?
Yeah, so it's a good question. First, I laughed. Then I thought, did you just publicly admit that I won? Your last thought as you went under was to throw shade at me. I was the most important thing for you to think about as you went under. And then, and I can't remember if it was Price or Miller or even Colt, but somebody made a comment about how stupid it was that that was his last comment and that he should try to have done something classier in the last moments of Wrassle. And what I appreciate, or maybe it was Benny, but somebody like let fire about how stupid that was. And I was appreciative that I didn't have to let fire about it because honestly, it was stupid. Wrassle was a massive accomplishment. It was an incredible place. Yes, it was popular with a lot of people for a long time. The last comment of the guy who made Wrassle was to throw shade at a guy who used Wrassle to build Federation X. That's sad.
Yes, it is. And again, back to what you were saying earlier, though, about Burnt, it was painful because you and I spent an entire weekend practically on the phone with him, and it was.
Yeah, I remember that. We were on the phone, so I don't think people understand. I remember I was in my last house, pacing in the basement because we have basements here. I know not all of you do. Pacing in the basement, talking. And then getting on conference calls and then getting off and talking to Eric. And then Eric go, okay, well, now he just wants to talk to me, but I figure you should be on the call. Like with this whole thing, and it was not short. And we got on more than once. And I said, hey, dude, it doesn't have to be this way. And there were moments where I thought we might be able to fix this. But the second that we said one of the ways to fix this is either give us back a version of Indy or let us come back in, but we're not just going to come in as any old Fed. Like that's not a thing that's happening. Any conversation of going back in that didn't include a seat at the table. And it wasn't that we wanted a piece of revenues. We didn't care about revenues, but we wanted enough influence to not have them screw with what we were doing. There was no, as long as that voice was mine, they were never going to let that happen.
So we're still going to be we're still in the Wrassle era here, but talking again back to FedEx.
Yeah.
And I think you've explained it a little bit so far. The idea of FedEx, why you came up with FedEx. I mean, obviously we were in a system that was not rewarding people for their skill. It was rewarding them for buying Wrassle bucks.
Yep.
But what other things drove you guys to come up with FedEx, and tell us a little bit about how that idea expanded into what it was?
So they announced Indy Wrassle. Bruce caught on to it right away and went to Tim and then to me and said, not like, hey, we can all go do this. Let's us do it. And like the Power Base was born before we had a name for the Fed. Bruce was going to use his Digsy's manager, Sneaky Jensen. Tim was going to use Lars. Of course, I was going to use Grayson. And the original pitch was like, Lars has X number of players who will follow him. Grayson has X number of players who will follow them. A ton of people love Digsy and played with Digsy. And then we started, so we figured out what we wanted to do for rules, for structure, all this kind of stuff. And really we started thinking about, if we do it, what makes it different? We can let them swear. Hey, what if we did it differently and they couldn't buy Wrassle bucks? and we started putting all that, but we would reward, like, I don't know if you remember, we could give away like as much as we wanted to people. And so we set everybody up with the same contract for winning and losing. So everybody got, $100 for winning and every match, and $50 for losing every match. And then at the end of, I think a month, based on standings or whatever, we would give out bonus dollars or activity bonus dollars, right? Like, we were set up to do all of that. You didn't need to buy Wrassle bucks. And so we built all of that, and we still didn't have a name. And I think Tim was talking to Vigilante, and Vigilante was the one who coined the term Federation X, right? And I don't know if we were in the middle of, dealing with or talking about Generation X or whatever at the time, but he came up with it, and it stuck. We did our marketing campaign. We launched at the beginning of the new year and blew up overnight, right? There were, you talked about not being able to stick. There were guys who posted so much in the first week that Naked Man would have had a hard time sticking, right? Like, everybody was posting 12 times a day. It was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. It was definitely a flurry of activity. So as we go into more FedEx related stuff and we clear Wrassle, what were some of your best and worst? What are some of the things that come to mind for you, best and worst moments when you were in Wrassle? Obviously, we know FedEx was a good but a bad based on what happened, but.
So I don't want to necessarily totally steal from some of the top fives that I prepped for you, because you asked me for my most impactful memories, most memorable moments.
Well, we can always hold that off and just do the top five if that's the
case. Let's hold for the top five, because I think it will steal from them. I will say this, big moments for me in Wrassle. As a player, I got to play with some players I hadn't been played with previously, and there's some big names involved in that. I got to run my first time in one of Tim's Feds. I got to run stories with you for the first time. That Wrassle's where Genocide and Alan Scott became the greatest tag team in the world, and I loved that time in that writing. I met Stan Daniels in Wrassle. Wrassle was the home of the original tag team between Man of War and Acidette. Like, there's so many good times that I would point back to all of them. A lot of players that I didn't play with in the Slam that I got to play with because of Wrassle.
Okay. Real quick, I just want to make a quick side note to Tim. You're welcome to join us on the CWA dirt sheet and use your techno voodoo. But for right now, it's still my show. You can have it back when you come back full time. So before we start talking more, well, actually, since we'll do one more FedEx thing, and then we'll move on to my next series of questions.
Sure.
The second iteration of FedEx, which we both know, you and I both know, included myself, in the great quote Wrassle exodus that occurred when we left. Yeah. What were your thoughts on how that played out?
So, quick shout out. The very first, obviously, you, Tim, and I knew we were going the second that the lotto crap went sideways.
Yep.
We did not have a plan yet, and really important for me to call out. I have the utmost respect for people who stand on moral principle, and also who are super loyal to their friends. And I don't know if you remember, we were like, we've got a message board. We knew Marlo was going to come. We knew so many of our players were going to come. Bill showed up before everybody and said, all right, fuck them. What are we doing? And I was like, all right, I guess that's the answer, right? And I think at that point, we didn't even really have this fully cauterized, hey, we're going to do FedEx again. We were just like, what are we going to do? And Bill showed up and dropped that, and Angelica was probably number 2. Yep. And then I want to say Our Father and Marlo. And I want to say this took place in the course of less than 3 hours. People showed up quickly.
And GPW fell in less than 24 hours.
Yeah. it was really something. And so to me, that will always be one of those indelible memories of us doing the second time. We struggled through sites, and it was Randy that went out and found the boards that we would end up using and made the initial banners, and it's helped us start to get some of the structure put together around the way that we were going to play. I got a friend to start building so we would at least have an engine. We went through a bunch of that stuff. We looked around to see if we could just buy a game and drop ourselves into it. But for me, the big moment was, we didn't recruit. We didn't do an advertising campaign like we did the first time. People just heard and started showing, what's the board link? And people just showed up. And it was so encouraging to me to know that our community kind of looked and went, well, that's dumb, and I don't want any part of it.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with that. It was amazing.
Yeah,
because when we left, I mean, I remember you and I having that conversation, and I was like, I'm nervous because I don't want to not play this game. But I think the loyalty, and a lot of people, loyalty is a lot. I don't give my loyalty out to people on a whim, and all of us, all these people in the chat, this is where the loyalty lies.
Yeah,
sure. and it's a great thing to see because it still keeps us together.
Yeah.
So let's talk characters for a few minutes, because when you do interviews, you like to ask people, who are the lesser known characters that you ran that maybe we're not aware of?
Yeah.
So I'm asking you the question. I mean, it's kind of hard pressed because I think I know a lot of yours, but
you probably do. And the truth is, in recent years, I've brought a bunch of them back and built some of these no names into at least like second tier names that you at least kind of go, oh yeah, that guy. I'll answer everybody's most burning question first. I have never, nor will I ever, have a Twitter lesbian. So with that covered, and the fact that anybody thought I could be one of the Anisi was just ridiculous. With that covered, so I think back in the slam, I made a bunch of characters early and often. I don't know that everybody knows that I played a character named Suicide, but I played a character whose entire purpose was to get hurt, right? And at differing points, as I would bring him back and then get rid of them and bring him back and get rid of them, sometimes it was just that he liked the pain. Sometimes he was really like hoping he'd get killed in the ring. Sometimes he just wanted to get hurt so he could go on workers' comp and not have to, right? Because that's a very Canadian thing, go on workers' comp and not have to get paid. Or sorry, not have to work to get paid. So I played Suicide a little bit. One of my favorite posts ever, I posted with a character based on Barney Stinson called Broda. And he was the guy who found himself in the ring, but really wanted to be the manager and couldn't figure out why he was in the ring and thought people getting hit was really stupid. Really like the guy who knew he shouldn't be fighting. And I did a couple of posts with them, and I didn't really stick with him, but I had a good laugh with him. He was probably one of those more comedic intentionally in attempts, and probably not the best character, but I had some fun with him. I remember Jordan had a good laugh at a couple of his posts and would text me and say, like, I laughed out loud, like that was really good. And for me, that was a win. Like that's all I was looking for with that character. Obviously everybody knows by now, and if you don't, I'm sorry that I'm going to ruin this for you. I was Austin James.
I'm waiting for you to name somebody specifically, and maybe people know who it is, but I specifically remember because I remember telling you how much I loved him. Kenny Powers.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I fucking love Kenny Powers.
So he was another one of I didn't get him off the ground and I didn't run with him long enough.
But he was so good.
It was clearly comedy gold for me. And it was one of those, you see it on TV and you're like, I could do that in our game. That'd be interesting. And so I did Kenny Powers. I did Demon Slayer was one of the original night, Ministry of Darkness kind of characters that I did that I don't think people would know. Obviously, Longshot has kind of crept back into the consciousness because I tried to bring him back at the start of this one and used him. Joe Power, obviously, I think everybody knows Joe, but we got lots of players who haven't actually played with Joe. I actually really like Joe as a character. I think he's super underused. Cole Stiles was a character I had created long ago and shelved and then brought back. And I think I was starting, before I got sick, I really felt like I was starting to find a groove with Cole, that I was enjoying playing with people who were not enjoying spending time with Cole and getting some of that fun dynamic out there. The truth is, I've probably, I was Saint Walker. Shreddy Mercury and I were a heavy metal hair band that decided to become wrestlers. And so I was Saint Walker. I'm trying to think, like there are probably too many that I can't remember because I played them for a week and they just didn't stick for me, or I didn't find their voice. In fact, Alan Scott was one of the originals that would have died if I wasn't doing them with Bruce, because I couldn't find his voice. Alan Scott should have died as a character. I couldn't find his voice. That's why Chris tells the story all the time that he didn't want me to bring Alan, because he only saw Alan in the age when I didn't know who Alan was going to be. He was just generic. And then I showed up with Alan having found his voice, and he was like, holy crap, this is amazing. But the truth is, if it wasn't for Bruce playing opposite me in the New Breed, Alan would be another one of these characters you guys have never heard of.
So it's since we're talking about all these characters that a lot of people haven't heard of, and it was brought up, and I think I'm going to give credit to Valentine for bringing it up. He wanted me to ask you something along the lines of, now let's really talk about who has more alts, me or you. So you have a lot of alts too.
Here's the thing. I think Mav can remember more of his alts. I think I can remember more of Mav's alts than I can of mine. But I think I might have made more characters than Mav made.
You heard it here.
I think that might be true. Here's the difference. I am quick to abandon the ones that I can't find legs on. And Mav keeps them in the background as NPCs and stuff. And I just completely burn them. I'm done with them and I carve them away. I don't tend to have them stay around and be interwoven. Like if you look at Longshot, he doesn't have a story with any of my other characters. If you look at Austin James, he doesn't have a story with any of my other characters. If you look, like the characters who had stories written between them, for me are the really old ones, like Ed and Hawk, because they were together in the Fed where I was playing them. Those stories became entwined. Joe was created to be Ed's antithesis. As his son, it was the idea of, what if your father was evil, would rebellion look like being really, really good? And that's why Joe was created. Contrary to Ed's theory that Ed Haberman's theory that Acid Ed's a face, my view of him has always been that he's a bad guy. And so for him, rebellion for Joe was to be a good guy. And so outside of that little kind of grouping, most of my characters don't have any interconnection, whereas a lot of yours do have some interconnection. There's even if it's just in the form of story, there's reasons for them to be tied to each other's sub-stories. And I don't have a lot of that. So I burn characters, like light a match, set them on fire, move on.
I mean, and when you speak of that, the one character for me that comes to mind automatically, and this is going to segue into our next topic, because this is obviously, this next topic has a special place for me.
Mm-hmm.
The character of Saber was specifically created to be an apostle of Nighthawk. He was specifically created for that purpose. And eventually I just tied him in with Storm and Jason and Brett as their cousin.
Right.
And it was just a way to keep him when I needed him, to keep him around, because Saber is probably the most developed character I've ever made that I haven't played. I made the decision to bring Carissa back for CWA. Eventually Storm will retire. And I want to bring Saber back. Saber's the one character I really want to delve into.
Yeah.
But of all the characters you made, and I love Alan. I mean, I love all your characters, I'm not gonna lie, but always at the forefront for me was Nighthawk, because you and I I know some people, hey, whether you believe in God or you don't believe in God, that's your thing. But Jeff and I have had many conversations because I do have a lot of faith issues.
Yeah.
I had a lot of issues with God, and through Nighthawk.
Who could live on this earth and not have some serious questions for God?
Right.
I got you.
Exactly.
I get it.
And through Nighthawk, the interaction, people, the one thing a lot of people I don't think, and again, this is a show I talked to you about, we'll do down the road about, mental health, faith, things of that. A lot of things get worked out in role play other than just stories. And through
Sure.
Nighthawk, I was able to explore religious aspects through his character, and it was almost like Jeff's talking to Eric, not so much Nighthawk's talking to Storm.
That's interesting. So I'll tip my hand on that a little bit too. Obviously, I created Nighthawk when I was a lot younger. I actually wasn't a believer at the time.
Right.
And you can see a change in my writing as I began to search and explore faith. And then you can see a further change in my writing when I became a believer. Like, I understood Hawk's voice differently at each stage as I moved through him. And that's just coincidence that he was the character that was set up for that when I was younger and wasn't a believer at all. It was just a story. And then it took shape as I went through the different stages of my life. So
yeah, and I mean, like I said, for me, Hawk was very.
I'm just laughing, like I get zingers in, and this one about if only you'd accepted Wrassle Bucks as your god, we would all still have Wrassle if that was true, Ed.
Well, I see Ed also.
Wrassle.
Yeah, I see Ed also commenting that all my characters are looking at because they bone each other.
It's true.
Not necessarily Stormbone's faith, and they're not related except by marriage. So that's how I'm connected to the whole entropy and grim thing. But
right.
But no, not and it's funny to hear that because I'd always, we never actually talked about the origins of Nighthawk, because when I first came across Nighthawk, he was in full on religious.
Yep.
He was the oh my God, my brain just went to sleep.
Shepherd of men.
Shepherd of men, right? Yep. And because that's what prompted he prompted me not only to get involved with Storm with Nighthawk, because there was the whole faith child thing, and right. Nighthawk always telling Storm that there's something different for you. And then I came up with Inferno and did the whole damnation of men. So we had good versus evil.
Yeah.
And it allows me to explore these things. And it's funny because when I created Inferno the same reason you created Nighthawk. I was like, dude, Kane is cool, but he'd be cooler if he could talk. That's the whole reason I made it. I mean,
we're so original, like
just so I can use
right.
Kane's image as my avatar. I created Inferno.
I just want to point out the number of times we've had people on, or we've had conversations on our boards about how dare the WWE steal our ideas. We are confessing that our characters are based on stealing ideas. So
yeah. Because I mean, let's be honest, Blitzkrieg is just nothing but a DX.
No kidding.
Let me take a look at my notes here. I'm sorry, my memory is just all over.
You're fine.
I have it pulled. Instead of making a document, I have Discord pulled up where I sent you everything.
Just reading it out of Discord.
I'm not reading it off of Discord because hey, I'm not computer savvy. Y'all are lucky I can even work this shit to the podcast. So let's see here. Background on Nighthawk. Well, we know how you came about Nighthawk, Ed.
Actually, some of you may not know this. The original iteration of Ed was a California surfer dude.
Did not know that.
And early on, I realized it was cliche, and he was a high flyer, and the original acid drop was like a super fly, and he was just so one-dimensional. And he got injured, and I put him on the shelf. And when I brought him back, he'd shaved his head, and he didn't talk in slang anymore, and he started getting meaner and meaner. And over the course of 6 months in CyberSlam, I figured out who Ed was going to be.
Real quick, Techno said DX copied us. it's possible.
Seems unlikely.
Yeah, probably not. It's possible.
No.
So talk a little, actually, before we move on to the next subject, one of your other characters that I specifically liked, because you had to read through the story to understand you were reading someone else's story. Tell us a little bit about Austin James, because a lot of people I know read Austin and were like, Austin James this, Austin James. It wasn't about Austin.
No. In fact, that is the story of an incredibly brilliant younger sibling lost in the shadow of his more beloved older sibling. Austin's the older sibling. You're actually not supposed to like Austin. You're supposed to be torn between having empathy for Jesse James, whose story it is, and at the same time going, but also Jesse, it's kind of turned you into a terrible person. And so that to me, that's one of my, it's some of the best writing that I think I've done. And I you know, I didn't win any big writing competitions that we had with it, but for me, the creative aspect of what I was actually doing, and for the people who picked up on it and really embraced it, I loved it. And I remain committed. I told the Kansas Kid if he stayed active that Austin James would make a return in 2021. And honestly, if you hadn't asked me specifically to bring Ed back, I had reached out to Chris to go, hey, if you're back and you're alone because your stable's falling apart, I know who you could call on for backup, because he's just the kind of arrogant prick that would be right there with you. And having Jesse walk around and document how much he hates both of them would have been fantastic.
Well, Austin James was, again, one of my favorites, as was Positive Joe Power. I mean, like, hell, man, I can't even think of one character that you made that I didn't love. So,
and I can think of lots of characters I made that I didn't love.
Well, you may not have, but I did. So, before we get on to any other top 5 lists or anything, we're going to talk about a few other off-the-cuff topics that
Sure.
Actually you came up with, because I'm new to this. I'm still learning. So, something that happened recently harkens back to the days and a term that was created because a certain person got so butthurt they left.
Dan.
Yes. Or as we like to call them, Kitty.
Kitty. You had a recent Kitty quit that I missed.
Yes, we did. When Jay-Z pulled up stakes and decided he didn't want to play anymore because the heat got too much for him. So my question for you is what are your thoughts on some of the Kitty quits that we've had? And B, I mean, Dan at one point, I'll admit, was my friend, but hey, you know what? You're gonna be a bitch, and I'm sorry. I gotta.
So I spent some time thinking about this, and I think this answer might surprise a lot of people. I think Kitty quitting is the best thing for the person who does it. The absolute right. If you're at the point where your behavior leads to a Kitty quit, you are way too invested, and you actually do need to walk away. We've seen some pretty ridiculous Kitty quits in our time. Heck, I had one of those moments with the corporate America swerve where I just needed to walk away. I was angry. I at least felt like I had a justification. I had money invested. I felt like that at least gave me some but at any point where you're more interested in being right than building the community, walking away is probably the right move. When you quit because people didn't sell that you were actually playing Superman, it's time to go. When you quit because you won the role play match, but the write-up didn't make it clear you won it by a lot, they didn't embarrass your opponent with the write-up, and so you quit over that, it is time to go. When you quit because you thought you were putting a stable together and somebody swerved you, it's time. By the way, I didn't just mean me on that one. I also meant Kitty, who quit because Benny swerved and became one of the good guys. Like, it's time to go. Now, I do think there's a difference between the immediate visceral reaction of swerves the way we used to do them, because nowadays we don't do them like that. Like we're such a tight knit, small community. One, I don't know that we're surprised all the time. And two, when we are surprised, I think we navigate it better, but we didn't used to. But yeah, I spent some time thinking about the question, and my answer is, rather than mocking the person for kitty quitting, let me just say leaving was the right choice. You were over-invested.
And you know, when you put it like that, I mean, because and I've been honest about this before. I've always tried to play mediator. Okay. And I'm going to be completely 100% honest about the whole Jay-Z situation right now. Okay.
Yeah.
I've always been the middle guy. I've always tried to find middle ground for a compromise. Okay. And I'm going to tell you something. If you go back and you watch these podcasts, especially ones I was on with Jay-Z, I spent a lot of time kissing his ass because I didn't want him to quit, because I see there's talent there.
Sure.
But you can't sit there and you can't expect a guy like myself or Jeff or any one of us who've been doing this for 20 years. You can't sell me on the fact that, well, I was planning to do stunt doubles because I want to be different. No, you did stunt doubles because you want to be Superman. Okay, end of story. And I know I got blasted for calling him out old school, and I shouldn't have done that because we're trying to attract. We want to attract new people.
So, when he says he got blasted, he meant by me.
Yeah. So, and it sucks, but maybe stepping away was the best thing for him, because it didn't matter.
I think about some of the people, and this points me back to, like, when I first said, knew that was a topic, and I thought you might ask me about it, and then you didn't put it on your list, and I thought you should. I had spent some time thinking about it. You talked about mental health and how the game has helped people deal and work through some things. I think that's true. But the game has also become an outlet for people where it became codependency, where the game became so important to them that if something went wrong in the game, it hurt their real life. And my thought is that kitty quitting is one of those manifestations of people who are over invested in what's going on in the game. I think if you really believe that in fake online internet wrestling, you were just getting screwed over, you need to go check yourself. And you probably need a mental break from what we're doing, because how could you be having any fun? And if you're not having any fun, why are you doing it?
You're not wrong. You're absolutely. We talked about this earlier, because when we were all on Slam, it was about titles, it was about glory, it was about self. Your character, you want your character to be the best. Doesn't matter, you want to be the best. But nowadays, we have conversations at the end of matches, and for instance, the other day, and I'm not going to. Well, we'll reference them both. The last Bombshell card, Carissa and Crow ended in a complete tie.
Yeah.
So I went to Brendan and I said, do whatever you want to do, make it compelling, because I want to continue this story. Because we've had this on and off again feud. I don't care who wins. I don't care how you end it. Let's extend the story. What some people might not know is that Jeff and Chris discussed before they even simmed, I think
Chris had simmed.
Well,
I hadn't.
Yeah.
But as soon as the surprise came, he was like, throw the sims out. This is how we should do this. As you mature, at some point, it's got to be about the story. Right.
And that's something that, like, for a guy like Jay-Z, you got invested. I'm being honest. The guy has talent. I like what he writes. That was not bullshit. I want to see Jay-Z come back.
Yeah.
But you got to understand, it's not about your character. You have to let your character look bad. You can't be Superman all the time.
Right.
And it's about a story. What makes a compelling story? What I'm trying to do right now to reinitiate some motivation for people to post. We have the bad guys. We have Dawson come back. So I posted something with Maverick just before we came on the air. Not because I'm trying to do something screwy. I'm trying to generate activity. I in character fired Gino because I'm trying to light a fire under his ass, because I want Gino to play. Let's be honest, we all want Gino to play. We know he has internet issues. He has time issues. Some of us, like me, sit around all day. I have all the time in the world. Gino doesn't have that, but we still want to see Gino.
Yeah.
Summer's hard. So we're trying to keep things afloat long enough to get from point A to point B. As far as the mental health thing is concerned, I still would like to do that podcast because I could probably, when I said earlier tonight, I almost ruined my marriage over C-Slim. That's not a joke. So hopefully you and I, and maybe we can get a couple of people who want to join us. We can do that down the road.
All right, that's some world-class shade. Naked Man saying, I could take or leave Gino. That is some world-class shade.
You know what? He's right, because I don't know about the rest of you, but I need Naked Man. I need Naked Man. It's funny. 10 years ago, I wasn't very into the comedy thing, but now if I have to draft anybody for anything ever again, Naked Man is always going to be my first pick.
So interesting. I want everybody to remember how late in the fantasy draft I was able to get Naked Man, because I think that was ridiculous.
It is because I really, over the course of the last couple of months, I appreciated Naked Man to start with, but over the course of the last few months, I've really become very appreciative of because like I've said before, a lot of the ideas that I've had the last couple weeks, those are not my ideas. Those are Ed's.
Yeah, listen,
credit where credit is due.
That's very creative, right? It's hard to look past that. I intentionally went into that fantasy draft like, hey, I'm not going to build a comedy fed. And I see Naked Man as a guy who generates a lot of comedy moments. And then I look up and I think it was in the 6th round. And I was like, I mean, I'm taking him, right? Like, he can't slide farther than this.
Yeah. And for those of you who may not, and I'm sure everybody has, but for those of you who have not had an opportunity to, you have got to read what he's doing with Dr. A, because Mrs. C,
he's doing great work.
One of the best. I am absolutely in love with that character right now. Mrs. C is like my new favorite.
Yeah.
So moving on to some other things. One question, because I know you're into comics, and I know that there have been opportunities. I distinctly remember one. There was actually a role play place where you could create a superhero.
Yep. So
what made you gravitate toward wrestling as a role play outlet more than because for me, when I was younger, I played D&D, I played Vampire, I've sat in a room with a bunch of other nerds. Oh, D20, what gravitated you toward wrestling more so than the others?
Yeah, so I'm like you, role playing that as a creative outlet, Dungeons and Dragons, all that kind of stuff, superhero games, space games. I played them all. I probably would still play some kind of fantasy role playing game, Dungeons and Dragons, or something akin to it, if I could get a group of committed players, which is really tough to do at this point.
Yeah, I'm telling you what, with Zoom. You get us 3 more people,
might be doable.
That's right. D&D thing every Friday night or something.
That's right.
I'm
in. For me, and I think this is something that comes up a lot, and I think we need to acknowledge it. We have players who like very different things, and I think sometimes there's a pull, goes like this. Sometimes the Fed gets way over here, and comedy writers are like, I don't know if there's anything for me to do here. And other times it gets way over here, and people like me, or maybe like Techno, who really like match action and actual wrestling stories, are like, hey, that's funny, and I can get in there for a post or maybe 2, but if we're going to do 30 of those in the next 2 weeks, like, that's not me. Like, I'm not feeling that. Like, I love that I could bounce off of Naked Man, but I would have had a hard time without Mano being in a continuous back and forth with Naked Man, because it's like Ed's a great foil, and I think Mano nailed it. Like, he works really well with a straight man, and Mano's that great straight man who understands the definition. Having Ed try and figure out how to hurt a ghost was good, but also left me in a place where I could go into wrestling matches and still be Ed and beat people up. And I like wrestling psychology. I like match action. I know people get bored with it. I like telling the match story. I like the high points. I like telling the story of what it looks like when we're in the ring together, and what does that look like when we're backstage. Like when I try and kill you in the ring, do I try and kill you backstage as well every time I see you? Like, what's that dynamic look like? I enjoyed the dynamic of being the veteran with Ed. You know, the guy who's clearly getting close to too old to still be wrestling, and yet can still throw down and hurt people, and having Maverick Dawson come in, and Bomber was playing, and that whole dynamic with Ed and Bomber and Dawson that we were building on, and Alistair was there. Like, I like those stories. I like the ring psychology bit. I like the comedy, but when you know, like, I'll be honest, when you tell me there's going to be a match between these two characters plus Godzilla and King Kong, like, I'm not reading that match. Now, and for me, that's kind of the root of what makes this work. Is I like all that storytelling, including the comedy, everything in its portion. And for me, my portion is probably 70-30, right? Max. I love the characters that make me laugh in the context of what we're doing. Do I care if wrestlers necessarily have a hockey game? I probably don't. But you guys did, and it was cool. And I would have been happy to have Ed show up and just heckle people from this if I could have found the time to post. You know, that's stuff that I can get down with, as long as we're always coming back to the central purpose, which is we're wrestlers. We get in the ring and beat each other up.
And I can agree with that. And again, you know, right now doing the booking and whatnot, we were supposed to be in Australia this week, but
I'm sorry, where?
Australia. Sorry.
Oh, hey, great place. I really like it.
Which we are going to at the next Bombshell, because Dr. A will not be booking the next Bombshell. He'll be doing the one after that because he's going to be away. But that was supposed to be, and the whole Skull Island thing just basically came off of Discord. When I saw Stan Daniels go, "I'll take you on with Godzilla," I was all over that. So, but you know, and it is tough because you try to find that balance, because you know that you have some guys who do comedy and are not necessarily into the wrestling portion. You know, and for me, it's not that I don't like. Obviously I like wrestling. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. You know, and like you said, you're sending in your letters to the online role playing that you're getting out of magazine. When I was 20, I was sending in my Luthez wrestling school that I plucked out of the back of a Pro Wrestling Illustrated, you know. Wow, I just lost my whole point there. Oh, I swear this is not working anymore. But you try to find that middle ground. I don't necessarily, only because we've been doing it for so long. The King of Wrestling really burned me on Match Action, and that Superstar title run burned me.
Of course it did. You were defending the Superstar title at least once a week, sometimes more, for months going into that.
But you know, I'm with you on this one. You know, I'm trying to find that common ground right now as the one booking the cards to appease everybody, because guys like Tech are struggling right now. Hell, I'm struggling right now with my characters because Sean is supposed to be a serious character. Carissa is obviously my most serious. Storm I can do either or, but it's kind of, and we're not bagging on people who do comedy. I'm not
at all. Everybody has the thing that they like. I'm just, hey, let's be clear. Like, I chose this because that's what I like to write.
Yeah. So, and hopefully, you know, with what we're doing right now, we'll see that even out a little bit.
And I want to be super clear. Like, I loved, I don't know how much more comedy you can get than like a hardcore thug like Ed taking swings at a ghost he can't hit. I love those posts.
Ed carrying around a toaster was fucking fantastic.
Yeah, right.
I love that shit.
Figuring out how a toaster fit in a wrestling, like, I was totally down with that. You need that. You know, when Strife had one leg, we did a lot of like comedy in the midst of wrestling that really worked because of that. I was really in love with the idea of Johnny Jr. when I came back, and how much Ed won't like Johnny Jr. just like on principle. And And, you know, then he comes down to the match and he gets involved and he gives me things I can play off of where I can have a moment of comedy. I don't know how many of you picked up on it, but we spent time in the match having Mano bring me all the other kitchen appliances because I missed toaster and I was trying to find a replacement. Like, clearly that's a comedy bit tucked away in a match that had a great, in my mind, great wrestling component to it, which is the big reveal, the surprise return, right? The reveal of the fourth man is, I know everybody got burned on the back. All right, you guys, they started the bad guys and didn't go. It's a wrestling angle. And for me, I like wrestling angles. And so the idea of a formation of a stable you weren't expecting, a stable that's prepared to run in and screw all the matches on a card until they get their way. The idea that anybody could have been the fourth man, to me, is what the writing we're doing should set up. If there's nothing like that that I can jump on for 4 or 5 months, I'll get bored and go away.
And by the way, for all of you out there, just so you know, and I'm going to throw this out now because it's irrelevant at this point, but you know, they were kind of waiting for somebody to step up and go, I'm the fourth man.
So Ed put that in the chat, and I said, hey, you should ask me that. I'm glad you brought it up. So here's the deal. We knew who we wanted for the fourth man, and the fourth man said, yeah, I'm in. But work blew up the fourth man. And also, like any good wrestling angle, as soon as we realized he wasn't going to get to jump in, and we knew the reveal we were going to do when we brought the team together, we were quick to realize, to pivot and realize the value. Think about all the matches we showed up and we intentionally attacked one person and left all of you with the opportunity to, like, they didn't attack me, but I swear it's not me. I'm not that person. Or, hey, even though they attacked me, it's not a double feint. Like, I swear it's not. Like, we gave you all this dynamic. We went into that dark room with Max Entropy and Sean Justice, and we laid out Max, or at least everybody thought we laid out Max. Like, Max could have come out after that and set everybody up and then swerved and revealed as the fourth man and shown he didn't get hurt at all because it was in the darkness. Like, we tried to plant all these seeds so that you guys could do whatever you wanted with it. But one of the first people to reach out and go, man, I want in on that, was Tim. And we were like, he said, I got to figure it, but I really like, it's such a great, and I was like, dude, if you want in, we can get you in. We heard from a bunch of people who wanted in, and we were prepared to pivot when that person put their hand up and said, not only do I want in, I'm just going to go ahead and post it. And we got to a point where we started talking about every opportunity. We talked about revealing the fourth man and then jumping the fourth man. So being the fourth man was something to be afraid of. Like, we pivoted with 100 possible ideas. And then when I got on that podcast with you and Chris started talking shit about Dawson, so I'd been away. I didn't know that they had split up and things had gone poorly. I immediately, knowing that you would put me in a match with Chris, got off, pinged Tim and went, hey, we need to talk. Like, you said you wanted, now's the time. And so we ended up coming back to all the way back to what really was one of our very early options. But through the whole thing, there were days that we would say, hey, like, we're waiting for somebody to care enough about it to, like, do a reveal and wait and see what we did. What's the worst we could do? Say it's not you and jump you? Like, at least there's some feud being built there. And
it's funny that you should say that, because at one point, and I believe I said this, I mentioned it to you. I don't know if Mano ever came to you with it, but I had been talking to Mano because I was trying to generate more activity, trying to generate some stuff to go on. I actually had Storm. There was a thing where I had Storm having issues with Techno because Storm was starting to see his career dissipation light going off. Mm-hmm. And he had super kicked Techno, he'd super kick Carissa, and as he walks out, he throws up 4 fingers. And I told Mano, I said, Storm be the fourth man, and I don't care if you beat him down. As a matter of fact, I want you to beat him down.
Okay, so I want to tell you this. I want you to know this. So Mano brought us that. He said, hey, Storm says he'll be the fourth man, and then we can beat him down. And we sat down, and Gino, in his brilliance, said, tell him that's what we're going to do. And then once he's in, we just won't let him quit. He'll be the fourth man forever. Like in classic Gino, he saw it and said, that's a good wrestling angle. I think I've got a better wrestling angle, which is that Storm gets in, expects to get swerved back out, doesn't. And when he tries to quit, we just follow him around because he's the fourth man. And it didn't come to pass, but it would have been entertaining. And the truth is, it really all worked out well, because if you think about what the biggest story was coming into kind of the explosive regrowth of Federation X at the beginning of 2021, it was Dawson and Robes who early on really put the building of the Fed on their back. And so the two of them schismed in this time period. And then Dawson gets revealed as the fourth man. And so when they finally inevitably come back together for their clash, there's this great context around it now. Like, what a great wrestling story. I love that Tim's in the chat going, I am the fourth man. Like, that is the perfect piece now. And it works, because if you remember in those time periods, Dawson hung out with Ed. He would go to Ed and say, what do you think about this? And Ed would punch him in the face, because that's how Ed teaches young wrestlers. Like, there was a dynamic there that you can look back on and go, I see how we got here.
Yeah. And just so you guys know, I told this to Jeff the other day, I must be getting soft in my old age, because one of the determining factors of me not, because I'd even offered again. I was like, maybe Storm could be the fourth man, because Techno needs something to do. And I said, but I can't do, I'm getting soft. I can't swerve him. I even mentioned to Jeff about bringing Sean in, and Tony came back, and Tony's committed. And I'm like, I can't do it, because I like what Tony has in mind. Let's be honest, that Haterade commercial made an impression on me. I love the character of Tony Robes, and I love the fact that I have a guy that I can work with Tony with, Yeah. But that's what we're talking about. We're talking when it comes to story. It's not always about the wins and losses. It's about what makes a good story, what's going to pull you in, what's going to make you want to get involved. And so,
I think you make a great point with that. And I want to point to this. Chris is back. He's like, okay, you and I having a match. And I'm like, hey, I'm not reading the boards. I'm not doing anything. I just show up for this stuff. I show up, but I know going into this that I've got Tim on the line. I know that Mano's going to show up and post for the match. I'm hoping Gino's going to, but he swerved me and didn't show up. And so we go in knowing this. Chris and I are going back and forth. We're setting the stage. We're doing the things. First of all, I pinged everybody in the Bad Guys chat. By the way, Tim will add you to the Bad Guys chat. I pinged everybody in the Bad Guys chat and said, I just told them all in the very first post I wrote that all 4 bad guys were on the yacht, and nobody picked up on it, because there wasn't a single comment. And so it's out there, and I'm like, And then Chris posts, and I go, hey, Chris, I posted. By the way, don't post again, because there's a post coming after me. And he goes, okay, cool. And I know he hasn't read my post because he hasn't responded. And then all of a sudden I get this message like, what have you done? And I'm like, now I know I've got him. And the idea and the fact that it's this like perceived betrayal, swerve, reveal, big moment. Tim comes back, and you can see it, like, we're knocking off some rust, but these are the stories, I think, when you see the character-driven nature of them, that get guys in the mood to post again. I'm in the mood to post, and I'm having to restrain myself, because I know Tim, like me, only wants to be back like part-time, super part-time, because I want to go out and start a post right now about how Ed's going to react after the match, now that Dawson, the next generation of badass, is in the Bad Guys.
Yes, and and maybe when you read the, because after that ended with Ed winning, Mav came out and made some announcements that you haven't seen. Real quick too, I just want to note this before, because we're going to do a couple top 5s and then we're going to wrap up, because we're hitting about the 2-hour mark now.
We just got up to 9 followers. We're at our highest peak. They're coming on.
Hey man, I could stay here all night. Actually, I have to drive. It's a very convoluted story, but I have to drive to the Georgia border tomorrow. That's only like a 4-hour trip, but not a big deal. Anyway, no, I'm not getting drugs. I have to go help my sister is picking up her son from my ex-brother-in-law, who's a douchebag.
Got it.
Hope you watch this one day, douchebag, because I'd like to punch you in the face. Anyway, sorry. I did not post a traditional results post on the OC board. The results are actually in the role play I did with Mav. And I want to clarify one thing real quick. In the match with Corey and Mags and Reza, the match ended for Reza and Corey being tied. So I role played it that Corey is the actual winner because Reza was not under contract to CWA because I had fired her prior. I did that because I know Bill doesn't have the time to play right now, but I won't forget the fact that he tied. So eventually down the road, he'll get the shot that he deserves. So OOC, I just want that to be aware that that's why I did what I'm doing there. And then when you read what happens with the main event, again, that's more to drive a story than, so you guys understand that. But before we close out the evening, one other subject I want to hit on, because you brought this up and it is an opportunity to pick your mind, which maybe one day will help me beat Alan with Storm. Probably not.
Sure.
That's not gonna happen. Let's talk about match structure and flow. You touched on this a little bit before. We're going to talk about this real quick, and if you've got a few moments, maybe one other, and then we'll get to our top five.
Sure.
But for you, I know when I write match action, I spend a lot of time making sure I literally beat the hell out of my character.
Mm-hmm.
But I also try to make sure that when I'm writing match action, I'm trying to go by, okay, this is what I've seen in an actual ring. I know how long it should probably take to recover from this, because a lot of people, maybe they don't understand this, but a lot of people I see were like, oh, well, you took a spine buster, but now you're up punching him in the face. Well, I don't think that's really going to happen.
Right.
So, but when it comes to match action, you are one of the best people I've ever seen write match action. So talk to us a little bit about how you come up with your structure and flow.
So I think it's really important that I give some credit to Wheels on this. Wheels is actually one of the best at converting what the pros do to what we write, which is match psychology. And doing a lot of matches with him a long time ago, one of the things I figured out is we can write psychology into our match action as well. And so that psychology of like building and building and building, and then having the crescendo moment, and then having your lows, and like taking the audience that's around the ring on a journey, like that's really important. And so I try and remember that. So it, you know, if I think about a match with Tony, right? Like, even though Ed is clearly a heel, Tony's the super heel. So in that match, that's not really the bad guy, even though that's who he is, because Tony's playing, you know, modern day MJF, Ric Flair, take your pick, right? And so I've got to kind of be the guy. So realistically, I should be up a lot more because he's the bad guy. And then he should cheat to get his up moments. And they should be harsh, but short, including the finish. Now it's awkward because we're doing heel versus heel. So I go in about that, and I think about, then for me, how can I use the commentators to paint the picture so that it's not all narration? How do I intersperse chain wrestling into it? And am I representing the type of wrestling that they would do? So I think I did a mediocre job in the last one. But when I was really on fire with Alan, I understood, you know, what moves my opponent would use. I knew what Storm was going to use. I understood how we were supposed to play it. So Alan's the face, Storm's the heel. Here's the dynamic, right? Instant karma initiative versus Storm's got to beat me down, keep me down, so that my comeback can tell the story that the crowd's emotion can come up on. And so I tailor the story around that psychology, and I spend some time thinking about it, and then the rest of the match adapting, because who knows what you're going to do, right? I go in with a plan, and then everything is a pivot from there. And I think the other piece is, if you read my match action, I know a whole bunch of moves that hurt but don't cripple. And I read other people's match action. I'm like, how's this match not over 40 minutes ago? Like what Tony and I did was ridiculous, like ridiculous, right? He broke off a mop in Ed's leg, and then I had to sell that Ed was so tough that we could just keep fighting.
Yeah.
That's it. I get it, right? We're doing a little hard, but honestly, like you can only do a match like that every so often.
And I get where you're coming from, because one of the things that I've always done with Storm and deep down inside is a sadist. I mean, I'll look at what him and not being funny. Look at what him and Faith do just when they're hanging out. Okay, so he gets off.
What the kids are calling it these days, hanging out.
Yeah, well, I'm just I'm trying to be a little PC here. But if you look at some of the match action I've wrote with Storm, I mean, Storm is beyond CTE at this point. He should have much for a brain.
Yeah, I'm sure Ed does.
But it's weird. I like beating the shit out of him, and so I do those high spots.
I gotta stop you. Gina lit you up.
Uh-oh.
Vampire and chill.
One of these days, I'm going to break that vampire thing. Y'all are going to fucking hate me for a month. I'm telling you.
That was so good, Gino. Mad props.
Good,
all right.
Good one. And Gino, I love you, brother. Please sort your internet issues out. We need you, man. We need Gino back. We need you. Anyway.
Yeah.
Back to what I was saying. And you're right. For me, in the King of Wrestling, I've always felt like what got me where I needed to be was the outside stories I was telling and not the match action I was doing, because I have never been a match action kind of guy. Like I get ideas in my head. I see how things flow. Mm-hmm. Basically what I do when I write match action is I think about Shawn Michaels matches in my head.
Sure.
And I think about what he does and how he does it, because my character is based on Shawn Michaels for the most part.
Yeah.
But that's not my strong suit. My strong suit is the stuff that, like when I was doing the IKI thing. If you go back and you read those posts in the historic rewrites thing or whatever, I spend I have a giant post, but it's broken into segments, and I tell story, then I do match, then I tell more story, and that's how I do mine. Jeff, on the other hand, when you read his stuff, it's like you can literally read it, and it's like you're watching a monitor in your head of what you actually see. And I'm talking not today, but like in the old days when Bret Hart would have a match. You see the match psychology. You see what's going on. And, honestly, I would say if you want to learn how to do match action better, then just the one to read.
Well, listen, I'm going to point you back to Wheels because he helped me sharpen mine a lot. I think he really gets the piece.
Absolutely. I give all the credit in the world, because that's one of the reasons I've always enjoyed having matches with Eric, is because he's good at it. You can give him crap for spelling and all, grammar and all. He knows how to write action in the ring. He really does.
I think the other thing that I benefit from, and you'll hear this when I talk about the things I really love, but it's, like this match was really easy for me. I think the action maybe got away from us a little bit, but this match was really easy because I knew what I was building to. And so I knew what psychology to set up. Yeah. And so if you think about the way we set it up, we started this story about, Mano having all these different size crates and boxes so that he could bring me all these appliances. But inside the fridge size box is the guy we're really waiting to reveal. And the whole match was about Tony having his moment and proving it's his time. And we let him play that up in his post so that we could have this moment at the end where it's not his time.
And it's brilliant, by the way. Make sure you go read it. It's so well done. One last question before we get to our couple of top five.
Yeah, I just want to comment on something going on in the chat, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Gino really calls a good point, right? He said, if you have the right story, the match action's actually easy. And I think that's really true. We had Gino and Ed, feud and fight. And it was a month long. Like we didn't slow down because it was working in harmony. And it was really, we had the right story. I think where match action gets tedious for a lot of players is as they're moving from week to week, and they're like, oh, this week I'm against Kieran, but I don't really have a story, so I'm just doing a match. And if you're just doing a match, I can imagine you would get burned out on this. For me, even when I just get a random booking, I always go into it thinking, how do I hit one of the big things that makes a match fun for me, whether it's a reveal or a big moment or a title win or a new feud or a swerve or like one of those. And if I'm not going to hit any of those things, then I'll ping the other player and go, what do you want to do with this match that I can help with?
Yeah. And there was one comment here. I noticed, by the way, that you and I apparently, if we like the same comment, because we're on the FedEx account, it cancels out. Because you liked Gino's comment, and I went, "Oh, let me like that too," and then it disappeared. And I'm like, "Oh well."
We're probably both logged in as the same. Yeah.
But that is a good point. I mean, for instance, and I apologized. I apologized to Crow in on Discord. I didn't give you the match with Sean that you should have had. In an attempt to continue this, I've been running 3 characters again, and the other day when we did Hostile, I had so many goddamn matches. I burned myself out. So this week I kind of took the week off. I really did. And Crow, I still owe you a better match, and you'll get one down the road. Yeah. Before we go to the top 5, tell us real quick how you build your distinct characters.
So I actually have had a couple conversations with people about this, and Bruce and I used to talk about this a lot. He was so good at finding the voice of his character. And so for me, I have a cheat sheet. I have an actual profile. Like when you play D&D, you have a profile of your character. I actually fill out a profile of my character. Are they going to be more agile? How tall are they going to be? What's their? So I go through all the profile stuff, and then if you've got any of the advanced role playing sheets, they talk about background and they talk about significant life moments and stuff. And I sit down and I figure that stuff out, and it's because it's all the things you can't see that make the character interesting. And so early on, I didn't do a lot of that, and it took shape while I played. And then later on, so when I brought Cole this time, I knew all of that for Cole. I knew everything he was going to be. I knew that the interest in Cole was him thinking everybody was his friend, no matter how bad a person they were. And that was the dynamic. And I also know what it will take for Cole to snap and go over the edge. Like, I've got it all figured out. But I start with those foundational pieces. When you sit down across from somebody and say, tell me, yeah, Ed just nailed it. It's world building. Is really getting that full picture of who they are, and not just a name, a gimmick, and the color of tights they wear. It's everything about them. Do they have family? Do they grow up? Like Austin was so well pictured because it was through the eyes of his brother Jesse. And I already knew what the family dynamic was. I knew who Austin had been in high school, and I knew who Jesse had been in high school. And I knew how that played out when they went off to university and how they ended up in wrestling together. Like I knew all of that stuff. And as a result, I knew what their voice was. And that's what was missing when I first played Alan. We threw them together because Bruce and I wanted to make a tag team. And so when I finally figured out what Alan's voice was, it was like being shot out of a cannon. It was this flat, dead character. And I went from being like really super mediocre with him to like on this track where it was clear he was going to be one of my best characters overnight.
Yeah.
And it really is that voice and bringing it together. And so for me, I'll use the term that Ed threw out because I think it's the right term. You need to world build for your character before you ever start writing them.
And it's funny that you said that, because now some of my characters I did that with Storm. When I first created Storm, I had no direction with him at all. I created him based off a character I made for Raw as War on my PlayStation, who I called JP Storm. So that's where that's why eventually he became Jason.
We're just going to start calling him JP from now on.
Whatever's fine. Because actually his middle name is Patrick, for those who don't know. So
got it.
And when I decided I wanted to commission, I made Maverick my first inclination was not to make Maverick and Storm brothers. That Storm has always been a work in progress, whereas a guy like Saber, and you know his backstory because I talked to you about it. Saber was, before he was a wrestler, he was a cop,
right?
And and his family got taken out by a drug lord, and I could go on and on, but I'm not going to. But yeah, it helps when you more of my newer characters, like with Sean, I had a clear definition of what I was going to do with Sean. Sean was Storm's son with a girl that he knew when they were young, and he had him 18. Storm didn't know about him. He wound up in an orphanage. Just so happens that orphanage, there was a priest who worked there by the name of Hunter. But Sean didn't know the connection until much later that Hunter was actually Nighthawk. Nighthawk actually, for all intents and purposes, raised Storm's son.
Yep.
Now, Sean has since gone off the rails, but that's been played out. And who knows what will happen with him as we go forward. But yeah, structure, that's a good thing to do. But we're going to do a couple top fives, then we're going to do a couple questions and answers, and then we're going to wrap it up because I don't want to be up all night.
All right, so let's do it. So
the other top fives that we had.
Man, I've got answers for all of them. You name them and I'll run them.
Let's go ahead and go with the one that you came up with. Top 5 high spots that you love in matches.
Yeah, that's one that I said to you, like, let's talk about this. For me, you have your matches that you just do because they're on the card. Then you have your matches where you're building something with the person. But there are 5 things, in a match that pop it for me. Like, and I'll start with a title win. Like, obviously, a title match that has some history and culminates, doesn't really matter to me which way it culminates. That's number 5. Number 4, when the match has a hot finish. I wish more people who won were like, oh, I won and I get finishing rights, would go away and write that they didn't win and give it a hot finish and be like, and then they have a reason to be mad at the person who got the win but shouldn't have got the, like, instead of just taking the win, which is, and I'm as guilty of it as anybody, but I love a good hot finish. And I think we should, you can't do them all as hot finishes, but it really adds to the strength of a story when there's an unjust victory.
And see, real quick on that point, I like the same thing. That would be on my list as well. But I usually let the other person do the ending. Whenever if you see me win rights and I'm giving the rights over to the other person, it's usually because I'm doing that. Because I'd rather that take place than Storm winning or whoever wins.
Number 3 on my list, a major NPC plot twist. There's some key NPCs that float around in our game. Think about Mrs. C as one of them, right? She's much like Jesse James. She's the actual stories about her, but Dr. Abortion is the character, right? And very same idea. And so we get these moments in some matches where something changes with a big NPC, and it's almost bigger than the match. And I love when we find ground to do that. I think about Johnny XS and Kira and Strife and some of those stories. I think the NPC plot twists are super cool. Number 2, the surprise returns. Obviously, recent evidence should prove that surprise returns. You build or you have a big match or a high spot moment in someone's career, and then unexpectedly the big return happens, and you go, I always think of that. Honky Tonk Man's opponent can't face him this night at SummerSlam, and he runs his mouth in the ring. I'll face anybody in the back, and you get the Ultimate Warrior making his big return. And what a pop it was. I mean, you go back and watch it now as a fan, you're like, this is a terrible match. But in the moment, it was a phenomenal surprise return. I love that for a match. Even if the person's not in the match, or if it's hey, I'll find a tag team partner. And you always know they've got somebody in their back pocket. It's cool no matter who it is when they bring out their opponent, but they bring out somebody who's not on the roster right now. It's always cooler. It's always a bigger pop moment. The match is always more interesting. And then the number 1, of course, for me, and I've advocated it a lot. We did a whole podcast on it, but there's nothing like a swerve in the middle of a match. Like, it's just gold, right? The only thing better than what we just did is if the New Breed were still a team when we did it. It's the only way it could have been better.
And I have to say that my top 5, for all intents and purposes, mirrors yours. My number 1, obviously for me, and I know most people would be like, well, you'd be on board with Swerve because you swerve so many people. As I said, in my old age, apparently I'm getting soft. But
so soft.
But for me, bottom line for me, whatever makes the story better.
Yeah.
I don't care about winning. I don't care about losing. I got Sean running around. I'm Sean 4 belts. Well, not anymore. I lost the Crow. Write an ending that makes that more intriguing to me. I don't care that I lost those belts.
Right.
I make it. That's how you make feuds. So that would be, so I'm just going to stick with that for my top 5. The next top 5 that we're going to do, let me see if I can find it here because I was just looking at it a minute ago. We'll do that one last.
And by the way, it's I think it's 25 years, and Gino just named like the biggest in-match swerve, maybe shy of the Orndorff turns on Hogan moment or the Macho Man moment, but maybe not, right? The third man NWO moment might be the biggest in-match swerve in wrestling history.
That's a good point. Join the man. Ed says like Naked Man swerving his best friends Mano and Ed to join the Society of Serious Wrestlers.
Ed, we were so devastated by that. You don't understand. I thought we had a thing going. I was talking to Matt. I don't think we're going to get over it. We're pretty shaken by that.
Hey, I got to tell you, if nothing else, something that surprises me is even though we didn't really complete Sponsor Wars, and quite possibly we won't anytime this year, maybe next year, something that came out of Team 7-Eleven is that Storm and Naked Man, they became really close.
You can't trust Naked Man. I don't know what to tell you. You cannot trust that.
But I can't help it. I can't help it. Right now we're in the middle of dealing with a voodoo curse because when we were in New Orleans, apparently we all got drunk and dug up some voodoo priestess. But anyway,
all right,
that's on Ed. That's not on me. The next one is we got 2 more. Top 5 people that you wish were active in FedEx right now of everybody that we've ever played with.
Okay, so I don't think first of all, I'm going to give you 10, not 5.
Okay.
I don't think the first one will be a surprise to anybody, but I'll start at the bottom. At number 10, and I did this based on them being at the peak of their playing, right? Like, I want them active. I want them at their best.
And I'm betting my number 1 and your number 1 are the same person, but go ahead.
So my number 10 is Vigilante, Jake Price, Rev Future, Benny Blair, and Homeless Jay. Okay.
See what he did there?
My number 9 is Hola Chico. My number 8 is Death Wish. My number 7 is Johnny Rude. My number 6 is Johnny XS. My number 5 is Lars, but I would settle for Maverick Dawson. My number 4 is Marlowe. My number 3 is Stan Daniels. My number 2 is Genocide. And my number 1, for a reason that should be incredibly obvious, I would give anything for him to be able to play with us right now. It's Diggsy Brown.
I don't have anything in my glass right now, but
I hear you. I'm empty as well.
I knew you and I were going to have the same number 1, and I have Gino on my list as well. Like I said, man, I know you guys stuff going on, but I love you, brother, and we really miss having you around and being even semi-active.
That's right. 100%.
And I can agree. Also, for me, XS was on my list, and not so much. We all know I like Rude because I've had Rude in all my feds. But honestly, my favorite, still to this day, my favorite character of his, it would be a toss-up between Homicide and Nigel Crawley. I always thought those 2 were the betters. But
I liked Homicide a lot. I want to say this too. I didn't put anybody on the list who isn't playing but was committed to really coming back, except for Lars. So like Terror wasn't on my list, but that's because Terror was playing and then had to step away. Stan's on my list because I just don't know when he's ever going to get back. And I think the same deal with Randy. And if you guys don't know this, and if you're like me and you do pray, Randy's got some serious health issues. And so please remember that and keep him in your prayers.
We actively do here, as well as my wife's Bible study group, that, you know, I've mentioned that to them, like when you weren't doing so well, you know, you were on that, you know, too. And I would love, you know, one thing real quick, I just want to give Marlo some love here.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people don't know, back in Wrassle, he came to me with several ideas, very creative. You know, that Crazy 8 match that we had back at CWA, that was Randy's. That was all Randy. And he does a lot more in the background than people realize. You know,
Sure.
People like me and Lars and Jeff are out in the forefront because we're doing what we're doing. But then you got, for another guy too, Terror. Terror does a lot of work behind the scenes. You guys, you know, he comes up with those graphics that are phenomenal. You know,
also the rap videos that are phenomenal,
and the fucking videos are just sensational. Yeah, you know, Marlo would be on my list of guys I'd love to have back as well. Now we're going to go into our last one, and then we'll get to some questions real quick. Our last list is the top 5 most impactful, memorable moments across all forms of the game.
Yes.
That we've had.
So I'm going to break that into 2 lists. I'm going to talk about it as the game, and then I'll talk about it as from me, the player, like big moments for me. So first, let me talk about the game. So number 5 on my list of the most impactful or memorable moments for the game, Federation X 2.0. Impacted a lot of people, multiple games. Number 4 on my list, the $11 billion situation, the closing of Wrassle, right? That was a big deal. Number 3 on my list, and the only reason this is 3 and they're reversed is because Wrassle was on, I think, weaker standing when it finally closed. But the talent invasion that Gino and Chris orchestrated, where we went from FedEx back to Wrassle and went to show, was a big deal. Number 2 on my list, the closing of C-Slam. And I know for a lot of people that should be number 1, but for me, number 1 was the creation of Federation X.
Our number 2 and number 1 are exactly the same. Yeah. As a matter, yeah, our lists are almost identical except for a little switching here and there. So if you want to, go ahead and go into your second one.
I love that Tim said, hey, don't forget the breaking of the lotto. Yes, Tim and I broke the lotto and caused a whole bunch of issues, including Federation X 2.0. So it's kind of tied to the number 5 there. For me personally, you know, biggest impact moments or memorable moments from the game. Number 5 was winning my first barroom brawl in the Slam. I won a couple, but the first one, I think, put me on a lot of people's radar as somebody who could actually write. And I think before that, a lot of people didn't know me or didn't think much of my character. And when I won the barroom brawl, I got a lot of people who started to take notice. And that was one of the first times that you and I interacted. And had a chance to really talk about the writing that was going on. So that was a big deal for me. Number 4 on my list was the corporate America swerve, for all the wrong reasons. I wasn't super happy about that. It is is one of only 3 times that I think that I bordered on a kitty quit.
Bill made me do it.
Yeah. Bill says it's Tim's fault. There's a lot of finger pointing in this one.
I followed Bill. That's all I'm saying. Number
3, Funky Alex promoting me to take over CGW. You know, going in and putting an end to the Space Fed was one of the great moments of my career. Number 2, winning the King of Wrestling. I take a great deal of pride in that particular run. And not just because I won, but because I got to face some pretty exceptional people, notably in the semifinals and finals, beating Genocide and Storm. And it was no small feat to get those matches won. And I think it could easily have gone the other way. And so I take a lot of pride in that victory. And number one most impactful memory for me was Bruce passing away. Of all the things that we did and all the times that we had, I was devastated. Still am.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know there's dead air. I can't.
I couldn't pull the list and not say that. It's the truth. Of all the things that have impacted me, that I've enjoyed or not enjoyed as a result of the game, you know, first of all, building that friendship, we did crazy things, and I don't know if you guys know any of the stories. You know, we sat in basically Ben Affleck's seats at a Bo Sox game because they were being scalped, and Bruce bought them so that we could sit down front, and we talked our way into a private members only club while we were out drinking one night. Like we have ridiculous story. He was a tremendous friend, and we spent a lot of time together, even though we lived 10 hours apart. And losing him was a blow, a really big one. You know, we built Federation X together. Like, I think a lot of people think about Tim and I and forget that he was a massive role in what we did.
Yeah, I mean, I did not, unfortunately, get to know Bruce as well as you did. He would not be on my top 5 impact because, like, I didn't know him as well. Sure. But I enjoyed everything he did. I did talk to him. I do miss him.
He phoned me. It was the middle of the night here, and I forget, or maybe super early in the morning here, and it was whatever time it was in China because he was covering the Olympics. And he would phone me and have 30 seconds to update with me, and just be like, and I'd be like, dude, what are you doing? Like, go to the Athletes Village, go to this thing. And he goes, I just want you to feel like you're getting to be part of it. Because that's who he was.
You definitely, yeah. I mean, you whether you knew him really well or you didn't, if you knew him, there's a reason you miss him. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
For me, for my top 5, if we're going to talk the personal thing, yeah, and I appreciate what you said earlier. I knew I was sunk from the get-go. I knew it. I dug my own grave and I tried to recover. And that's why one of these days you and I are going to sit down and Alan and Storm are going to have a proper match, you know. For me, winning my first Ultimate title was a high point for me.
Sure. Yeah.
Which also would encapsulate, it's not a high point, but to be remembered as the last person who won an Ultimate title.
Right.
It's not a high, it's hard to put it on a list, but it's kind of there, you know. Number 4 for me would be kind of where you were with you know, Funky. He comes, I get a message from Funky, hey, you're on the list. You're taking over IRCW, and then a couple months later, I get another message. Hey, you're doing a great job. Guess what? CRF's open. That's yours. Had they not trusted me to do that again, I would probably be doing what I'm doing right now.
Right.
Number 3 for me probably has to be being able to unify the Ultimate title with the TSOB, which eventually became the Ultimate son of a bitch title. You know, that again, that's something that was, you know, that was amazing. Number 2 probably is a high point for me because I thought I had no chance in hell was winning the BRB with Inferno.
I remember that.
And you judged that.
I did judge it.
And that's what actually, after you mentioned your BRB, I thought about it. that's what prompted you to reach out to me in the first place.
Yep.
So winning that with Inferno, of course, number one for me is being allowed to be able to create the CWA and the NGPW. I mean, I have love for the NGPW, of course I do, because it was my creation. But CWA, I can't tell you what that means to me. You know, being able to do that and start from scratch. You know,
Yeah.
it was fantastic. But we're gonna take some. I'm gonna ask you some questions I already have, and we'll take some questions from the chat before we wrap up. But one thing I forgot to mention earlier, and I'm dead serious. If Jeff is serious, I'm serious, because I saw Tim say he's in. If we can find a couple more people, I'm really down to start a D&D Zoom group, and we can play on the weekend, like one day a week for a couple hours every week. Because I'm gonna bet you right now, Jeff is a fantastic dungeon master. I'm betting.
It's fun. It is fun.
So, I'm telling you right now, I will take my ass to the bookstore. I will buy all that shit all over again, including the dice. If anybody else is in, because Tim said he's in, so we got 3. We need like 2 or 3 more for a party. You guys bring that. But on to the questions. And I have this specific. I'm going to ask these 2 specifically because I was asked by Tony Robes, Chris, who can't be here right now because he's asleep.
Lame.
His first, this is not so much a question, but he wanted me to let you know he will always appreciate what Jeff did for Tony with Longshot. It helped elevate Tony right at the start, and more people should take notes because this is how the game should be played. Hopefully, I get the chance to return to favor one day in the future.
That's awesome. And I'm glad he appreciated it. It was intentional. Obviously, it was intentional, right? Like, you have a choice when you're selling your character. Tony took a shot at Longshot, and I had a choice about how to deal with it. And I didn't heal him. I put him down because it put Tony up. Yeah.
I was not here for that, so one of these days we'll have to talk about that because I did not have prior knowledge of that. Now, of course, number 2, this is not going to be any shocker to you because it's Chris. So his number 2 question is, when is Alan Scott going to stop being a bitch and face me in the ring? Stop ducking me, pussy.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you the same thing I've said every time, and hopefully this time, because it's a more serious podcast, you'll hear me when I say this. So I'm intentionally not playing Alan Scott. Chris has been asking, like, I knew Chris wanted Alan as soon as he started playing Tony. But if I brought Alan in, unless Gino swerved, and if Gino swerved me, I wouldn't have gone after Tony. I would have gone after Gino. Like, Alan would have buried Tony before Tony could get his legs under him. And that's unfair to Chris, right? And to me, I wanted Tony to have legs. I think Chris now could come after Alan, but there's 2 problems with his situation. The first is this: in character, Alan looks at Tony and says, "What have you done that I should give you a shot at me?" And the answer is nothing. And I don't say that to begrudge Chris. Like, the character is playing big, he's playing mainstream, but he doesn't have what it takes to get Alan's attention right now. And 2, I actually don't like. I'd rather play the characters I haven't had incredible runs with. I'd rather play more Cole Styles. I'd rather play more Austin James than bring Alan back. There's really only one thing that could get me to bring Alan back, and it's not on the horizon. Or I might point out, if Storm finally goes, because when Storm is ready to retire, that match will happen, and I will call Alan, and Alan will say yes, and it'll make Tony mad, but I'm sorry. Yeah, I think, like, Chris he's brought his game to a particular level with Tony. Early on, he wasn't ready to have Tony in a match with Alan. It would have been bad for the character's development, because once you lose, it's hard to come. Like, you can play the big dog, but you'll always be the guy I crushed, and I don't see any reason to ever have to talk to you again. And that's how Alan would treat it. So it would have been bad for him.
Oh, absolutely. A couple before we get to questions from chat, so hold your questions for a minute, because I'm actually on Discord again. I'm going through the Discord ones. Stu man, or sorry, not Stu man, Stuntman. I'm sorry, Stuntman Cole Calhoun. By the way,
Freudian slip.
Number 6 on my list of people who I wish were active. This is in character is Sean. Sean misses you desperately, Axel. Cole asks, why did you fake an illness to avoid role-playing?
So I have an update for you guys. Not only was May a horrible month, they figured out where the infection was, and they gave me a whole bunch of antibiotics. And I think I maybe came on one time and told you guys the story, the wrong antibiotic. And then like in this whole song and dance, when I came out the other side of it, I didn't, like, all the testing said I was okay, but I felt wrong. And 2 weeks ago, we found out the bacteria had hidden in another part of my body. And I think we're all dudes here. A super uncomfortable last place you want a bacteria to be hiding in your body. And so I'm back onto an even harder regimen of drugs to try and deal with it. And it is a shit show. So, yeah, I appreciate the question, tongue in cheek, but it's an ongoing battle.
Well, and I will make sure to pass that along to Jen to make sure she gets that prayer thing going for you, because we want you to be good.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, a little Ed's better than no Ed, or Alan, or Austin, or Cole, or
whoever. Take your pick.
Valentine asked, "Do you think Nighthawk could take John XS in a fight?"
I think Robot Nighthawk could totally take Johnny XS.
We already asked this question about who had more alts. Oh, here you go. This is a good one from Dr. A. And I'm interested to see how you see this. Miss C asks, the bad guys, why the fourth man wasn't a person of color and why they are upholding the white patriarchy.
Great question. Fantastic question, Mrs. C. Number one, Twitter lesbians should stick to their own division and stop trying to run with men. And number two, we're upholding the patriarchy because we are the patriarchy, and because people pay to see men fight, they don't pay to see you fight. Let's stop pretending.
This next question comes from Naked Man.
By the way, that was totally an Alan Scott answer. That not my actual answer.
Naked Man asked the bad guys if they legitimately think they are heels because all their actions would 100% make them stone coldish anti-hero faces.
So I think Gino is an anti-hero. I think Man of War is an anti-hero. I think Ed is a heel. But I think the whole purpose of the bad guys is to be the bad guy. You know, Man of War does it best when he does his promos. You want somebody to be the bad guys? Fine, we'll do it. Like, I think that was the idea behind bringing it together.
All right, I'm looking for see if we got any more here that you haven't already answered, and it looks like no. So let me switch back to the chat here. And if you see any questions that I don't, because my phone is very limited on what I have, but oh wait, is Austin James just a male Twitter lesbian? And that's from Gino.
So I'm not sure. I have to think about what he's implying there, like a male Twitter lesbian. Like, aren't all Twitter lesbians male? Isn't that why we call them Twitter lesbians? However, I think the fair answer here is he's just upset about the fake Twitter account situation. Or maybe not upset, maybe he's bragging because he swiped the Austin James Twitter account before I could actually get my hands on it. But I think the answer to that question is Jesse James would love it if he was a Twitter lesbian.
If there are any more questions for Jeff in chat, now's the time to ask them. While I actually mentioned the fact that I remember the Austin James Twitter account because when Dave Diamond had his super crush on Austin, he was promoting it in his signature in his post all the time.
So I did see one. Brendan asked, "Hey, I remember one time Acid Ed didn't sim. I assume to deliberately drop the title to Weedy. How many times have you done that?" I have forgotten to sim many title matches because the story was better. And if I simmed, I might have won.
Yeah, that actually is a good question.
Yeah.
Let me see if there's anything else here. So far, nothing. So unless something comes in or you see, because you can go, unfortunately on my phone, if you can see this, I see how I'm trying to scroll backwards and it won't go back. I only get like 5 messages at a time. I have to constantly back button and refresh the chat to get it to come up.
I think Ed's comment that Ed and the bad guys might be anti-heroes in line with this question from Miss C is insightful, right? Like, is the way that they behave, is the upholding of the patriarchy, is more white guys, like, does that make them heroes to who the audience of wrestling is? And that actually you could do a whole podcast about, because it might take some dark turns. Like, that might actually be the case in a lot of places.
All right. Well, unless there's another question, and I don't
there is.
There is.
Tara just asked.
Go ahead, sir.
So he said, "Hey, what are some of the best stables you have come in contact with, either as talent or a commissioner?" So I've seen a bunch. I'll tell you that I liked. Obviously, my personal belief is the Good Guys was the greatest stable ever. I loved the Uprising, which Diggsy Brown and Terror and some other people were part of. I had the opportunity to participate in the Urban Legends, which was a short-term stable that came together in Wrassle that had Blood Brothers and I think there might have been a guild member or two, and like all running together. Tim probably remembers everybody who was in it better than I do, but Nighthawk and Lasher were in it, and Diggsy Brown was in it. Vigilante was in it. And so the Urban Legend run was really cool. The first stable I ever ran across was the Architects of Armageddon. And, at the time I was in awe of what they were doing, because they had 4 members in one Fed and one indie in C-Slam. And so it was really cool to watch the way that they worked off of each other. I think that the network can't be overlooked. Obviously, they did incredible things in Wrassle. The fact that they could break up for a year, come back together a month before Stable Wars, and then win it was, a pretty impressive piece of organizing. It also might have been a flaw in the Stable Wars structure. Blood Brothers, the AG, obviously, the All Stars. I saw them from afar, and certainly they were impressive. But yeah, those would be the ones that I either came across or up against. And of course, how could I neglect, like, when we did the Invasion, the talent, and we went back to Wrassle, that assemblage of skill was super impressive. Great question.
When it came to stables for me, I mean, I would have to go. Obviously, again, I agree with you with the network. Probably one of the most dominant ones I've seen, period. The time I spent with the Blood Brothers, that was a fun one for me. Bobby Bob's All Stars was the very first stable I was ever part of. I loved what we did back when GeoCities was a thing. Fleshy was like, "Dude, can you set up a thing?" And yes. I mean, we even had a merchandise, because one of the things that we always had, Bobby Bob was always telling us, was merchandising, which we stole from Mel Brooks,
Right.
from,
Yeah.
Spaceballs. I even had we made a website where you could buy merchandise. Bobby Bob's was great. One stable that I actually liked that we did. I don't remember us being around for a long time, but you talk about coming up with a really cool, weird name, was Subliminal Violent Fetish, which was myself, and I believe Cyberpunk was in it. I know Mano was there with us. I don't remember I think Techno might have been there. And I always remember liking the name.
Hold on. I see a related question in the chat. If Techno wasn't there, did he get help, or was he able to pull his head out of your ass by himself?
I'm his sidekick. I don't know what you're talking about. I made that perfectly clear when I came back. I was Techno's sidekick. Y'all got that mixed up.
One of the best potential stables that didn't really come together the way that it should have was the Instant Karma Initiative. Standing on the sidelines as a commissioner, I thought that was going to be a much bigger thing than it ended up being. And you suffered from an emissary disappearing, obviously.
I'm going to tell you, I will say to that your emissary and I had some seriously deep plans about who we were going to try to bring into that and what we wanted to do with it. And then he had no choice; he had to leave, and I tried to carry. I think if the initiative, the Instant Karma Initiative, had taken place maybe a couple months prior to the King of Wrestling, it might have gotten somewhere.
Yeah.
Because by the time the King of Wrestling was over, I was so burned out. I lost, because if you remember, after I killed Storm, I came back in as, oh my God, I can't remember his fucking name. What was his name? Kane something?
Oh yeah, Nathan Kane.
Nathan Kane. I came back
yet another alt.
Yeah. Specifically because I was going to try to build that up, and I had people in mind, but unfortunately the burnout was just too much. And after like 5 posts, I just went. So
yeah. Brendan asked, "Is there a moment from the reboot that stands out as reminding you why you missed the game, or why the game was missed?" I think I could probably point to a bunch of matches and a bunch of angles. But I think for me, and it's strange, it reminded me of why the game was missed, even though it wasn't part of the game before. I think things like the podcast and things like the dirt sheet, and seeing guys come on and seeing the friendships to guys that are all over the world who've played this ridiculous game for so many years. And seeing how quickly and easily you fall back into that place of comfort with your friends, where you're not afraid to make a couple jokes and everybody knows it's not personal, it's just a laugh. And that the creativity that came out in what we did in the supplemental areas of the game, on top of, go take a look at where we were from about mid-February till mid-April. The best 2 months of the game we've had in a decade.
I mean, for me, 2016, we tried to come back. Everything was going well. My laptop completely croaked, and I had no way to post, and I kind of just drifted away. And it's funny because, when you don't have it, you don't think about it.
Yeah.
And then Jeff and Tim reach out to me, and we do that interview, and I didn't realize how much I had pent up when you don't have it. Because when you're not doing it, you really don't think about it. But then when that outlet presents itself, and you have guys to work with like Tony and Dawson, and you got Techno who comes back. I know I joke about this when I talk about, Techno, kind of a character like my brother from another mother in my hetero life. I mean, Techno and I have been a team for a long time.
Yeah.
And we lost touch. I lost touch. there were years that went by that I didn't talk to Jeff, and it's like you said with the friendships, it's like putting on it's a slipping on an old glove. It just slides right on, and you realize that you miss those things, which is, why you guys are busy, why everybody's busy doing what they're doing. I'm trying to keep everything going, because I know in August when things, summer starts to wind down, things will pick back up, and I don't want to see it die again. I like the outlet.
Yeah.
I need that, I need that creativity.
I will say, so Gino hit a couple of good ones. Leave it to Miller to think of them. Tony the Parrot is one of the reasons that I realize how much I miss this. I got to tell you, first of all, just the idea of mocking Tony for taking ideas from the past and then trying to pass them off was brilliant. And that parrot got over big time. I love that. And by the way, what that reminded me of is how much I miss Gino when he's actually playing it on his game. The level of douche that he can stir into any angle, I love. And so for sure that would be one of them. Definitely. And he also threw out like the whole anus gate situation. So that was not something that I missed. That did not remind me of why I wanted to play the game. But I do appreciate that a lot of people enjoyed what went on with that massive secret character run that Seth and Bill went on.
Yeah, that was being on that reveal was pretty funny. And I know I give Gino a lot of shit because he hasn't been active, but again, I'm throwing it out there. You're missed. You really are. I sometimes I don't think you realize how much, and it would be. I need that douche in my life. Storm needs the douche in his life. Everybody needs the douche in his life. But unless there's no other questions, we're about to hit the 3-hour mark here.
So right before we do, you asked me to prepare a list. You dropped and you didn't ask me for it, and I'm going to give it.
Oh, okay.
You asked me who my top 5 slammers of all time were.
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
And I'm going to tell you who my top 10 players of all time were, or characters. You could take it as players because I don't care which alt they play. And none of this will be a surprise to anybody because you saw the draft. This will be a little different than the draft because there's no strategy to it. It's just straight up. So, and the first thing I realized when I made this list is how many incredible players didn't make my list. And I feel guilty about it. There's some pretty amazing players that I've played with. There's tons of players I didn't play with that I know are bigger names, that I know were better, that they didn't play with me. So they're not on my list. But there's really, really good players who have crossed my path or played a lot with me who aren't on this list, and I feel bad for that. So let's just be clear, having lists like this suck unless you can put your top 50. With that said, number 10, Death Wish. Number 9, Storm. Number 8, Johnny Rude. Number 7, Johnny XS. Number 6, Royal Ryan Scott. Number 5, Marlowe. Number 4, Stan Daniels. Number 3, Strife. Number 2, Diggsy Brown. And I think the greatest slammer of all time is Genocide.
I just heard his ego grow exponentially.
I see Paul. He's got his sad faces because he never makes my list. Paul, I just want you to know you were number 11. Maybe.
I am honored to be number 9.
Maybe. That's my answer to everybody. Like, oh, I didn't make your list. You were number 11.
Hey, there you go. I don't really have a list for that one, but I appreciate being number 9 on yours.
Just look at our Fed, right? Like I just ran through that whole list. We've only gotten to play a little while together, but I didn't have Naked Man on it. Clearly, he's an incredible talent. I didn't have Weed Man on my list. Like, that dude is awesome. Everybody knows I love me some Valentine. Like, we have a ton of players that didn't make my top 10 that I'm doing a grave injustice to them by not considering them top 10. Terror is not on my list. That's a grave injustice.
Well, that's why I didn't make a list, because I couldn't go there. If
It's
I'm like
hard.
you, a top 5 is too hard.
It's hard.
It is. It really, I mean, hell, even during the draft, it was hard, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, we're going to go ahead and wrap that up real quick. Before we go, next week, as far as I know, I have to get in touch with everybody, but next week we will be back with another CWA dirt sheet. And maybe if Tim has the time, we might have some bells and whistles. I'll have to get with Tim on that one. When it comes to the role play, guys, just remember that Tim's not back full time.
Correct.
So just like Jeff's not back full time. So if he's only, maybe, you know, I'm hoping to get, we can engage Mano, get him in there a little bit, and maybe get Gino in there a little bit. But just remember, when you're posting, if you're not getting replies a lot, they're not full time yet. They're still working their way back.
Also remember that if you don't tag me, I for sure didn't read it.
Exactly. So next week we'll be back with a dirt sheet. Maybe Lars will be with us, maybe he won't. The following weekend, depending upon what Jeff's schedule is, I would actually like to do that podcast, you know, about the ways role play can affect people, help them work through some mental things, maybe, you know, the good effects, the adverse effects, because I think those kind of things need to be talked about. I really do. I mean, we do have our share of people in FedEx who've had some issues. And you know, and I think that needs to be brought to light, but that's just me. What did Miller say?
You said their own pace, you say?
God, with his own pace. I'm gonna stick my foot up my your ass at my own pace. Damn it!
Right.
Get on here. Stop it. Get in here. We are not going to be doing a results show tomorrow unless Gino wants to suddenly do one, because I probably won't be here. I have to, like I said, I have to drive to the border of Georgia with my sister to pick up her kids from her ex douchebag who doesn't want to drive them back down here. So
hey, hold on a second. You're giving douchebags a bad name.
Well, I mean douchebags, not Gino douche, but Gino douchebags are good. But I'd like to thank everybody who hung out. We just hit double digits, by the way, as we're outroing. It says, so good job. Thank you for everybody that was here tonight. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you for the people who will watch this later on. A special thanks to Jeff to take the time to hang out with us. I kept him on here for almost 3 hours. I can't wait till this is on YouTube to watch it again. Thank you again for hanging out and answering all those questions. We will definitely have to, you know, sit down and do this again at some point, but we will see you more than likely next Saturday for the dirt sheet. For now, I am Maverick, and I'm here with Grayson. We're out of here. You guys have a good night.
See you guys.